From Olympus, a soft voice speaks, drifting gently through the quiet night. Welcome back, traveler of myths and dreams, to another story told beneath the calm sky of the ancient world. Tonight, you're listening to the next chapter of our long journey through the 12 Olympians, the timeless gods who shaped the breath, the bones, and the memory of the world. We've walked with Poseidon through the storming sea. We've descended with Hades into the silent underworld. We've watched the golden halls of Hera, the wisdom of Athena, the light of Apollo, and the shadows of Artemis. And now, we arrive at a different kind of power. One that whispers instead of roars. One that bends the world without ever lifting a blade. Tonight, we fall asleep to the entire story of Aphrodite, the goddess who shaped desire, war, empires, and every quiet heartbeat in between. Before we begin, take a slow breath in, and let the day fall softly away. Let the noise loosen, let the thoughts settle, let the stillness open. Because Aphrodite is not a goddess you meet in a hurry. She is not thunder, she is not fire. She is not a warrior, or a ruler, or a judge. She is the pause between two heartbeats. She is the spark that begins a story. She is the reason kings hesitate, the reason poets write, the reason heroes fall. And tonight, she is the gentle current carrying you into sleep. When people hear her name, they often imagine simple beauty, soft light, warm skin, roses, the scent of calm waves. But Aphrodite was never simple. She was never delicate. She was never small. Her power was invisible, but absolute. She could turn allies into enemies and strangers into lovers. She could begin a war with a promise and end a kingdom with a glance. The gods of Olympus wielded weapons. Aphrodite wielded emotion, and nothing frightened the immortals more than emotion they could not control. So tonight, as the world quiets around you, we step gently into her origin, a beginning unlike any other in the pantheon. Not a birth of thunder like Zeus, not a birth of shadow like Hades, not a birth of daybreak like Apollo or midnight like Artemis. Hers was a birth of silence, a birth of sea foam, a birth carried by the tides long before Olympus had a throne, a king, or a name. Before we cross that threshold, settle deeper into whatever holds you now. The bed, the pillow, the blanket, the soft warmth of your own breath. Feel the tension loosen. Feel your shoulders drop. Feel the quiet gather. Because Aphrodite's story begins where all quiet stories begin, in the space between motion and rest. Long before the world was shaped, the sky god Uranus fell. His power broke. His body scattered, and from the violent foam of the shattered heavens, something unexpected rose. A gentle shape, a figure forming without pain, beauty unfolding without effort, fully grown, fully radiant, fully divine. The sea carried her, rocking her gently, lifting her to the surface as though she weighed nothing at all. Waves curled around her like hands welcoming a child not born of flesh, but of creation itself. And as she rose from the foam, the air changed. The world changed. The gods, far away and unaware, would soon change too. Because the moment she opened her eyes, desire entered the universe. Not desire as hunger, not desire as want, but desire as a force, something that could shift destinies, bend rulers, and soften even the coldest hearts. She stepped onto the shore with no history behind her, yet already ancient. She breathed in her first breath, though she had never known breathlessness. She looked at the world not with innocence, but with understanding so deep it frightened even the immortals. And from the moment she appeared, the balance of Olympus would never be the same. Before Zeus had thunder, she had influence. Before Athena had wisdom, she had instinct. Before Ares had war, she had longing. Before Hera had marriage, she had connection. Before Apollo had prophecy, she had the power to shape fate without ever raising her voice. That is why tonight's story is more than myth, more than history, more than legend. It is a story of what cannot be seen but is always felt. Because Aphrodite lives in the spaces between choices, in the pause before a confession, in the moment two strangers hold eye contact, in the passing warmth of a hand, in the tremble of a decision that changes everything. She is the quiet force that moves the world. And as we drift deeper into her tale, let the world around you fade further. Let the thoughts slow. Let the breath deepen. Let the body soften. Imagine the early world, vast, untouched, shimmering under a sky not yet ruled. Imagine the soft glow on the horizon. Imagine a quiet shore where the waves exhale and return like a heartbeat older than time. There, on that ancient coast, Aphrodite rises, not stepping out of the foam, but being carried by it, not walking into the world, but awakening it. The sea does not make her beautiful. She makes the sea worthy of beauty, and every step she takes leaves a trace, a warmth in the wind, a shimmer on the sand, a softness in the sunlight. The world notices her before it understands her. The gods feel her before they see her. And mortals, ages later, would tell her story as though telling the story of love itself. You're not just hearing about a goddess tonight. You're hearing about the moment emotion became divine, before Olympus knew thunder, before heroes knew glory, before any mortal whispered a prayer into the darkness. There was the sea foam. And from that sea foam, Aphrodite. Now, rest a little deeper. Let the waves soften in your mind. Let the world fade to a soft blue haze. Let your breath move like a tide coming ashore. This is only the beginning. Her story unfolds slowly like dawn, like desire, like the first moment you realize your heart is changing. Tonight, we follow every step, gently, quietly, all the way to sleep. Long before Olympus ruled the heavens, the world was a darker, stranger place, shaped by forces too old for language and too raw for story. The sky hung low and heavy, pressed close against the earth, as though afraid to look at what it had created. Uranus, the sky itself, watched over the world with a cold and distant presence, a god who saw everything but felt nothing. And Gaia, the earth, breathed beneath him, carrying mountains, forests, oceans, and the earliest seeds of destiny. But harmony doesn't last long in stories older than time. From their union came children powerful, vast, and restless, the Titans. But Uranus, fearing their strength, pushed them deep into Gaia's body, locking them away, refusing to let them rise. The earth groaned under the weight and the pain, and in her suffering, a rebellion was born. Gaia shaped a sickle of jagged stone, sharp enough to cut the sky itself. She handed it to Kronos, the youngest and boldest of her Titan sons, and with one swift, violent stroke, Kronos overthrew his father. The sky ripped open, the world shuddered. Fragments of Uranus fell into the sea, swallowed by waves that churned with a strange new energy. And from that swirling mixture, sky, sea, and violence, something unexpected began to form. Not a monster, not a weapon, not another Titan, but a shape of impossible gentleness. Foam gathered like lace on the surface of the waves, glowing faintly as though lit from within. The sea rocked back and forth, as if cradling something precious and terrifying all at once. Then, as the light deepened and the foam thickened, a figure slowly rose. A woman, grown, radiant, calm. A goddess before the world even understood what a goddess was. Aphrodite. Her hair flowed like liquid dawn. Her skin shone like the inside of a seashell. Her eyes held a softness that did not belong to the violence that birthed her. She was beauty, yes, but not fragile beauty. She was creation without force, power without weapon, presence without effort. She did not crawl or stumble or blink in confusion the way newborns do. She simply existed, fully formed, fully aware, fully divine. The sea lifted her onto its surface, carrying her on a shell like a floating throne. Waves curled around her legs like gentle servants welcoming their queen. The air trembled softly, as if learning for the first time how to breathe. And as Aphrodite drifted toward the shore, the world changed. Flowers bloomed where her gaze touched. Light softened where her shadow passed. The wind, once sharp, turned warm. The sea, once restless, grew still. Even the gods, those who had not yet met her, felt her arrival like a pulse beneath their skin. Something new had entered the universe, something that would move hearts more easily than storms, more quietly than nightfall, more powerfully than thunder. Because her birth was not violent, not gentle but inevitable, Aphrodite stood on the sand as though she had always belonged there. Her first footsteps were not hesitant, they were certain, graceful, soft but absolute. Where other gods needed weapons, thrones, or bloodlines, Aphrodite needed nothing but her presence. She would change Olympus not by force, but by feeling, and that frightened the immortals more than any sword. But this is only one version of her birth. A truth carried by waves, carved into stone, whispered in temples. There is another, a quieter story, a softer story, one that begins not with violence, but with lineage. This second tale says Aphrodite was born not from foam and fury, but from the union of Zeus, king of the gods, and Dione, an older goddess whose name drifts like mist through forgotten myths. In this version, Aphrodite is not an outsider arriving fully grown into the world. She is a daughter, a child of Olympus, raised, cherished, woven into the divine family before stepping into her own power. This version paints her life in gentler colors. It imagines a young goddess, luminous and graceful, wandering through the halls of Olympus with curiosity in her eyes. It imagines her learning the movements of the stars, the rhythms of the sea, the breath of the earth. It imagines Zeus watching her with a mix of admiration and worry, already sensing the potency of her presence. This softer origin does not contradict the first. It complements it, because Aphrodite was always more than one thing, more than beauty, more than desire, more than myth. She was the force that could not be contained by a single story. And the Greeks, in their wisdom, allowed both births to exist, one shaped by violence, one shaped by lineage, one shaped by the sea, one shaped by the sky. Two beginnings, one destiny. And that destiny was unlike any other among the Olympians. Most gods had origins tied to hierarchy or inheritance. Zeus, destined to overthrow Kronos. Hera, born to rule beside him. Hades, lord of the dead by divine agreement. Poseidon, ruler of the sea by brotherly pact. Apollo, shaped by prophecy and light. Artemis, shaped by independence and the wild. But Aphrodite, she was not shaped by a throne, a prophecy, or a war. She was shaped by inevitability, by the simple, ancient truth that beauty in all its forms must exist. In a world of storms, she was calm. In a world of power, she was presence. In a world of laws, she was longing. She came into existence not to rule, but to influence. Not to conquer, but to awaken. Not to command, but to connect. Her birth did not mark the start of order or chaos. It marked the start of emotion. The gods would fight over her. Mortals would build temples for her. Empires would rise beneath her blessing and fall beneath her indifference. But all of that comes later. For now, she is simply walking across the soft sand of a world still forming. The sky glows faintly, as if greeting its new daughter. The sea hums behind her, as if reluctant to release her. And the breeze, gentle as a whispered secret, wraps around her like a cloak. There are no trumpets, no cheers, no royal ceremony, only the quiet understanding that something essential has arrived, a force that will shift destinies, a power no one can resist, a goddess who is not born to dominate, but to stir. She steps forward, and the world follows. Because even in her first moments, one truth is clear. Aphrodite is not here to be admired. She is here to be felt. And from the moment she takes that first breath of mortal air, the language of love begins. Not romantic love, not sweet or shallow love, but the ancient kind. The kind that moves nations, the kind that builds legends, the kind that ruins kings, the kind that awakens something deep inside the human chest, something wordless, something older than thought. She carries this with her as she moves, the ability to make the world feel. No other Olympian has this. Zeus can command obedience, Hera can enforce loyalty, Poseidon can drown empires, Hades can keep the dead, Athena can shape strategy, Apollo can craft prophecy, Artemis can guard the wild, but only Aphrodite can bend the heart. Only Aphrodite can shift desire. Only Aphrodite can make a hero hesitate. Only Aphrodite can make a god surrender. This is why her birth mattered more than either myth explains. This is why her origins shimmer with duality. This is why she rises from both sea foam and sky lineage. Because she is not a goddess of one beginning, she is the goddess of every beginning. Every spark, every longing, every heartbeat on the edge of change. And as she steps forward for the first time, the world begins to hum with possibilities it has never known. Her birth is not violent. Her birth is not gentle. Her birth is inevitable. And in that inevitability, she becomes eternal. Aphrodite walks from the shoreline into a world that has no name for beauty yet, carrying with her a presence that feels both ancient and newborn. The earth beneath her feet warms, recognizing her not as a stranger, but as something it has been waiting for. The sky, still healing from the wound Kronos cut across it, softens in color as though embarrassed by its own violence. The sea, restless only moments before, grows quiet behind her, as if listening for her next breath. She has no parents in one story, and yet in another, she has two. She has no childhood in one story, and in another, she grows slowly beside gods and titans. She belongs to neither version entirely, and yet she completes both. This is the paradox that surrounds her, the duality that shapes her, the mystery that follows her into every myth she touches. For the other Olympians, birth is a chain. Zeus is born because Kronos devours his children. Hera is born to uphold the order of the heavens. Hades is born to inherit a portion of the world. Apollo is born because prophecy demands it. Artemis is born to protect the wild. But Aphrodite is not born because she must be. She is born because she simply is. Her existence does not follow the logic of gods. It follows the logic of emotion, an emotion that cannot be destroyed, an emotion that cannot be controlled, an emotion that must eventually rise, no matter what the world looks like when it does. As she moves, time itself seems to adjust to her presence. Waves slow, clouds drift lower. The horizon glows slightly warmer. Even the wind, once a wandering, uncertain thing, gathers itself into a gentle current that wraps around her like a greeting. She does not speak, but the world understands her anyway, because Aphrodite's language is not sound, it is sensation. She becomes the first divine presence whose power is felt, not commanded, the first goddess whose influence arrives through the heart, not the throne. In that way, she stands apart. The universe has seen gods born from fire, shadows, storms, and prophecy, but never from longing, never from a softness powerful enough to change the fate of empires, never from the quiet insistence that life must be more than survival and structure. As she walks, something stirs beneath the surface of the sea. Dolphins follow her path, circling as if escorting a queen. Seabirds fly low, dipping their wings in the water as though offering reverence. Even the shells embedded in the sand seem to shimmer, reflecting the light she carries. If the first version of her birth is shaped by chaos, her arrival is shaped by calm. If the second version is shaped by lineage, her arrival is shaped by destiny. Where the other gods inherit their power, Aphrodite simply releases hers with every breath, not by trying, just by being. And the world reshapes itself in response. The gods, far away on Olympus, feel a shift they cannot name. Zeus pauses, sensing a presence that neither threatens nor obeys him. Hera tightens her grip on her throne, feeling a ripple of something she cannot control. Athena lifts her gaze from her strategies, sensing an emotion she cannot categorize. Artemis freezes in the forest, her arrows steady, her heart suddenly uncertain. Apollo, across the horizon, feels his music change pitch without reason. Ares, somewhere on a battlefield, stops mid-march, confused by a sudden softness in the air. Even Hephaestus, deep in his forge, looks up from the flame as if someone has whispered his name. None of them understand it yet, but something has awakened. Something that will touch each of their lives in ways they cannot avoid. Something that will not bow to their titles or their tempers. Something inevitable. Aphrodite pauses as she reaches the edge of the land. She looks up toward Olympus, though she has never seen it. She tilts her head slightly, as if listening to a call only she can hear. And the mountain, ancient and silent, responds with a tremble no mortal would notice. It is an invitation, cautious and uncertain, like a door opening halfway. The gods above do not know who she is. They do not know what she is, but they know she cannot be ignored. Aphrodite begins to walk toward that towering peak. Every step she takes marks the beginning of a new kind of power in the world. A power that does not roar or blaze or rule. A power that influences quietly, invisibly, endlessly. And as she walks, the world continues to soften around her. The sky grows lighter, the sea grows calmer, the air grows warmer, the earth grows gentler. Nature itself falls into step beside her, because she is not here to conquer the world, she is here to awaken it, to remind it of something it did not know it was missing, to introduce a force that neither weapon nor wisdom can resist. Desire, not lust, desire, the feeling that pulls one life toward another, that moves hearts, that shifts stories, that creates legends, that destroys kingdoms, that builds them again. Aphrodite brings this into existence with every breath she takes. In myth, she is the goddess of beauty, but in truth, she is the goddess of cause, the reason behind choices, the emotion behind wars, the pull behind partnerships, the ache behind longing. She is the force that shapes the spaces between people. Where Athena shapes the mind, Aphrodite shapes the heart. Where Hera binds marriages, Aphrodite ignites them. Where Artemis rejects desire, Aphrodite brings it in through the cracks. Where Apollo illuminates truth, Aphrodite softens it until it feels human. Where Ares drives battle, Aphrodite drives the passion behind it. Where Hades keeps the dead, Aphrodite reminds the living why life matters in the first place. Her steps carry her closer to Olympus, but even as she moves forward, her birth still ripples across the world. Mortals who have never seen her feel a strange warmth in their chests. Animals pause, noses lifting toward the wind. The sea remembers her touch. The sky remembers her glow. The earth remembers her presence, because she is not just a goddess born from sea foam, and she is not just a daughter born from Zeus. She is the inevitability of connection, the truth that no world, not mortal, not divine, can exist without the force that draws hearts, shapes choices, and turns strangers into stories. As she nears Olympus, the clouds gather like a curtain parting. A subtle shimmer falls over her skin, not light, not shadow, something in between. She climbs without effort. Her bare feet leave faint traces of warmth on the stones. The higher she rises, the more the mountain seems to tilt toward her, bending like a great ancient thing acknowledging a power older than itself. The gods watch her ascent in silence, some in awe, some in fear, some in curiosity, but all aware that the balance of Olympus is about to shift. Because Aphrodite's birth is not just the arrival of a new goddess, it is the arrival of a new law, a new constant, a new force that neither throne nor prophecy can restrain. And though the myths offer two versions of her origin, both lead her here to this moment, to the world's first encounter with the goddess of inevitable emotion. She steps onto the plateau of Olympus, the air shimmering around her. She breathes in the sky that once rejected her. She exhales warmth into a world that does not yet know how much it needs her. And in that quiet moment, something ancient settles into place. Her birth is complete, her presence unavoidable, her story just beginning, her influence already spreading like light through the cracks of a sleeping world. Because Aphrodite is not born of violence alone. She is not born of lineage alone. She is born because the universe cannot function without her. She is the balance between chaos and calm, between instinct and reason, between the sky that feared her and the sea that carried her. Her birth is not violent. Her birth is not gentle. Her birth is inevitable. And from the moment she stands on Olympus, the world begins to change forever. Her power arrived without sound, a current beneath the feet of Olympus that no hammer or spear had ever measured. She did not carry thunder, or trident, or spear. She carried attention, and attention bends reality in ways force never can. The gods were creatures of visible might, of laws and oaths, of thrones and boundaries that could be named and defended. Aphrodite's domain was nameless, by design the quiet gravity that pulls hearts, the secret calculation of desire no law can hold. When she crossed a room, the air did not explode. It shifted like the tide, and people moved without knowing why. Power, in Olympus, had always been loud. Aphrodite's power was quieter, and that made it all the more dangerous. Zeus could throw lightning and command armies, but even he paused when an emotion he did not invent moved the council. Hera could sanction marriages and punish betrayals, yet she could not police the inner landscape where longing quietly unfurled. Athena could chart strategy and foresee outcomes, but she could not map the sudden softening of a king's resolve at a glance. Ares could raise men to fight, but he could not weaponize the sigh that sent a soldier home instead of into battle. The other gods respected structure. Aphrodite respected only the truth of feeling, and the truth of feeling is its own kind of law. Her influence arrived in gestures, in half words, in the smallest acts that later became the largest decisions. She did not force a commander's hand. She made a commander's heart remember what it loved. She did not throw a city down with fire. She stirred a longing in a single woman who would leave a gate unlocked. This is why the gods both feared and depended on her, because she could transform governance into romance, strategy into surrender, oath into betrayal. When Zeus tethered the fates with law, Aphrodite slipped between the cords and made someone forget why the law mattered. When Hera insisted on marriage as a covenant, Aphrodite reminded people of the private hunger that sometimes eclipses duty. When Athena sharpened minds for war, Aphrodite unfurled the softer instruments that toppled empires just as surely. Power that lives inside the chest is not accountable to courts or war councils. It is private and therefore inevitable, and inevitability is the oldest currency. She taught the gods a lesson no one wanted to learn. that influence can be quieter than a bell and more binding than chains. The story of Hephaestus catching her with Ares in his invisible net is often told as comic humiliation, but in the hush of that hall, something far deeper had been exposed: the way desire can be public property, even when felt privately. Hephaestus hammered the net, not to shame Aphrodite alone, but to show Olympus what happens when private power makes itself public. The laughter that followed did not strip Aphrodite of power. It polished it, like a myth-turned mirror for the gods to see their own weakness. The gods laughed at the spectacle, but their laughter sounded thin because they felt the truth of it inside themselves. Aphrodite did not play by the rules of heroes. She rewired the rules by which heroes abide. When she turned her attention to a mortal, the consequences were not merely personal. They echoed through bloodlines, alliances, and cities. Anchises, a shepherd, was a quiet example of what she could do to the world by touching one life. He did not expect to be remembered, but the child born from that night carried a destiny that reached empires. Aeneas became a link between Troy and Rome, and the whisper of Aphrodite at his father's bedside grew into the roar of an empire claiming divine ancestry. Power traveled downwards from Olympus, through the tenderest channels, and Aphrodite learned how to invest small acts with grand outcomes. This was the true architecture of her strength, the slow accumulation of feeling into structure, the soft turning of affection into lineage. She made private nights into public foundations. She braided intimacy into history. The judgment of Paris demonstrates this in austere clarity. 3 goddesses stood before a shepherd prince, each offering a future, and Paris chose the future that asked for love. Hera offered power and dominion. Athena offered glory in battle. Aphrodite offered the love of the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris' choice was not about beauty alone. It was choosing which kind of future the world would follow: force or longing. That apple tossed by Eris was a catalyst for a chain of private decisions that led to public devastation. When Helen left with Paris, the Greeks united for war. Desire became the excuse, but Aphrodite had been the engine. What the poets sometimes forget is that this engine did not simply reward passion. It rewired politics. A single choice rooted in longing reshaped alliances, triggered fleets, and set heroes on paths they could not flee. Aphrodite's gift was often framed as gift and curse at once. She gave what people wanted, and in giving, she revealed the weakness of their orders. The gods who valued control were unsettled because their systems were vulnerable to what Aphrodite wielded: human feeling. She could cause a general to stop a siege because of a memory of someone he loved, and entire strategies would collapse. She could soften a ruler into mercy, and thereby doom his kingdom to ruin by showing pity at the wrong moment. The moral calculus of love is not military calculus, and that mismatch is where Aphrodite's power lived. It is not accidental that she is weakest to the blade yet strongest to the heart. In Homer, Diomedes wounds Aphrodite and she flees wounded to Olympus, and the image is both absurd and instructive. A god of influence struck by a spear proves the limits of divine intervention in the visible realm. But even wounded, Aphrodite's reach does not end. Her injuries become part of the stories that teach mortals the cost of desire. Her pain humanizes her, which paradoxically increases her influence. Mourners who hear of her wound sympathize and are reminded of their own vulnerably loved ones. Her vulnerability became another channel through which she moved the world. Consider the case of Hippolytus and Phaedra, an intimate tragedy that shows how her power could be punitive as much as generative. Hippolytus' rejection of Aphrodite's influence is treated as hubris, and the goddess answers in a way that destroys a life. She does not strike him down with divine thunder. She causes the human mind to fracture with forbidden longing. Phaedra's love becomes an instrument of ruin not because Aphrodite is cruel, but because desire can be a tyranny of the self. These myths serve as reminders that forbidding desire does not make it vanish. Instead, it finds more destructive doors. Aphrodite is not morally simple. She is a law of consequence rather than moral judgment. She operates like a force of nature, indifferent to human ethics, attentive to result. This indifference makes her both feared and necessary. Kings sought her favor because they understood that political authority without desire behind it can be brittle. A ruler who rules without love is efficient, perhaps, but unanchored. Love gives root to loyalty in ways policy cannot. Thus, the temples to Aphrodite were political instruments as much as devotional spaces. Leaders would seek her blessing to ensure marriages that solidified alliances, to make lovers faithful, to ensure heirs who would carry a dynasty. The offering of roses and doves in a courtyard was as much a ritual of statecraft as a private supplication. Her sanctuaries were sites where private longing translated into public stability or public scandal, depending on the turn of fortune. It is important to note that the worship practices varied, from the sensual rites of Corinth to the quieter, domestic observances of Athens and Cyprus. That variation itself is a testament to Aphrodite's complex politics. She was as comfortable in the political square as in the private chamber. The stories insist on this. She moves seamlessly between the two, because her domain is the bridge between private motive and public consequence. She made the intangible tangible and the private civic. So when the Romans recast her as Venus and tied her to the ancestry of Rome, they were engaging in a shrewd political translation. Venus, as mother to Aeneas and ancestor to the Julian line, is not mythic vanity. It is propaganda that uses divine desire to justify earthly rule. Julius Caesar drawing lineage from Venus was not mere flattery. It was a strategic claim of legitimacy harnessed through myth. This is Aphrodite's unique contribution to power. She makes legitimacy feel like fate by weaving love into origin stories. Even art and poetry, which often present her as a figure of beauty and muse, are political in this respect. A painting of Aphrodite is not merely aesthetic. It is a claim about what a culture values and what it will build its future upon. When Botticelli paints the birth of Venus in a Florence that is remaking itself, the image speaks to more than grace, it speaks to civic aspiration clothed in beauty. Aphrodite's face in art becomes a map of cultural desire, and societies use that map to chart their own directions. Her legacy is therefore twofold, personal and structural, intimate and institutional. She teaches that the private heart and public order are never separate. They mirror and shape each other. And for the gods, that mirroring was sometimes intolerable. They are beings of rule and ritual, yet they must take account of the very human forces Aphrodite embodies. In myths where gods attempt to control her, they reveal their own fragility. Zeus may decree, Hera may punish, but no decree can make a soul stop longing. Her power is the reminder that governance must reckon with the inner weather of people, not only with the outward instruments of control. For mortals, her intervention could feel miraculous or ruinous, depending on how it aligned with their fortunes. But for the divine, her intervention was always a complication of power. It forced the gods to accept unpredictability as a form of reality they must plan around. Aphrodite did not need to seize thrones, because she could persuade thrones into decisions they would not have made otherwise. And that is why she matters more than a goddess of beauty ought to. She not only modeled desire, she institutionalized it. She made the private compulsion into a political force, and in doing so she changed the calculus of kings and the fate of empires. Her power is not like the thunderbolt or the trident, because it moves through people's choices rather than through direct confrontation. It is inside the pause before a vow, the hand held too long, the promise made under moonlight. It is the engine behind the human decisions that become history. The gods learn to fear and respect this engine, and mortals learned to pray to it in equal measure. And so, in the quiet rooms and on the high altars, Aphrodite's influence worked its slow, relentless magic. She had only just stepped onto Olympus, and already the air began to change around her. Not loudly, not intentionally, just naturally, like the way sunrise softens darkness without ever asking permission. No goddess arrived with less force and more consequence. And because her presence was quiet, her disruptions were quiet too. But the gods felt them. They felt them the way one feels a storm forming behind the ribs before the clouds appear. Hera felt it first. Athena felt it second. Artemis felt it as an irritation at the edge of her solitude. Hephaestus felt it as a sorrow he could not name yet. Ares felt it as recognition. And from those feelings, the rivalries began quietly, deeply, inevitably. Hera, queen of Olympus, did not dislike Aphrodite at first. She feared her, but Hera never expressed fear as fear. She expressed it as control, as vigilance, as the tightening of a boundary not yet crossed. Hera ruled the sacred structure of marriage, loyalty, stability, the architecture of Olympus itself. She kept the family of gods together, whether they liked it or not. She held the world in place. And then Aphrodite arrived, weaving want through the foundations Hera had built, not breaking the structure, just loosening it, one sigh, one desire, one heartbeat at a time. Hera watched the way Zeus stared an extra beat too long, watched how gods spoke softer around Aphrodite, watched how even mortals prayed to her for things Hera wished she governed: love, longing, passion. The instability beneath civilization. Hera understood that kingdoms collapse not because of enemies, but because of desire misaligned. And Aphrodite was desire given form. So a silent war began. Hera did not confront Aphrodite with thunder or decree. She confronted her with distance, with cold glances, with the unspoken warning only queens know how to deliver. Aphrodite responded as she always did, not by arguing, but by existing. Hera despised that, because no matter how hard the queen tried, she could not govern the heart. She could punish a marriage, but she could not prevent why the betrayal began. She could curse a woman, but she could not stop a longing already blooming. She could confront Zeus, but she could not command the feeling that moved him. Aphrodite was the flaw in Hera's design, the soft earthquake beneath the palace floor, and Hera knew it. That is why she opposed Aphrodite at every opportunity. In the judgment of Paris, in the Trojan War, in subtle divine politics, it wasn't pettiness. It was fear sharpened into duty. For Hera understood something the others did not. Love does not stay in its lane. It spills into diplomacy, war, inheritance, and peace. It contaminates the rational world. Hera lived for order. Aphrodite lived for feeling. There is no peace between those two forces. Never was, never will be. Athena, meanwhile, did not fear Aphrodite. She resisted her. Athena saw the world as a pattern, a grand equation waiting to be solved. Every war had a strategy. Every strategy had a weakness. Every weakness had a countermeasure. Until Aphrodite entered the room. Emotion was not a variable Athena could calculate. Emotion broke patterns. Emotion made kings retreat from victory. Emotion made queens take reckless risks. Emotion made soldiers forget their training. Emotion made alliances crumble. Athena disliked disorder more than she disliked any god, and Aphrodite was a living undoing of reason, a constant interruption, a wild card. When Athena looked at Aphrodite, she saw not beauty, she saw error. She saw war beginning where peace was possible. She saw negotiation collapsing because desire walked in behind the door. She saw her carefully constructed plans unravel simply because someone felt something at the wrong moment. Athena valued discipline. Aphrodite valued surrender. Athena valued clarity. Aphrodite valued the blur between two people. Athena valued thought. Aphrodite valued instinct. And the two goddesses, though rarely raising their voices, waged a quiet conflict every time they stood in the same hall. Athena changed wars through the mind, Aphrodite changed them through the heart, and the battlefield obeyed them both. But in different ways. Where Athena guided heroes like Odysseus, clever and calculating, Aphrodite guided Paris, foolish, romantic, irrational. Athena saw that irrationality as a threat. Aphrodite saw it as destiny. Athena once said, in a whisper only the wind heard, that the world would crumble if every decision was guided by longing. Aphrodite smiled at that, because she knew the world would also crumble without it. Artemis' rivalry was different. She did not fight Aphrodite in politics or principle. She fought her in silence. Artemis, goddess of the hunt, the moon, and innocence untouched, believed deeply in autonomy. Purity was not merely chastity for her, it was freedom, a life unbound by longing, a life not tethered to another soul, a life unshaped by desire. Artemis lived in the wild, where love complicated survival. Her nymphs followed her, loyal and untempted. Her world was clean, self-sufficient, quiet. And Aphrodite threatened that. Not intentionally, just by existing. Aphrodite reminded mortals and immortals that connection is inevitable. Artemis built a sanctuary where connection was optional. To want no one was sacred to Artemis. To want deeply was sacred to Aphrodite. Their domains were built on opposite truths, and so their conflict surfaced in myths like that of Hippolytus, the boy who worshipped Artemis alone and rejected Aphrodite completely. Aphrodite punished him not for purity, but for contempt. Artemis defended him, not out of rebellion, but out of loyalty. Their clash was a whispering knife. Soft, precise, tragic. Aphrodite believed desire was part of existence. Artemis believed existence could be whole without it. Aphrodite touched the heart. Artemis protected it from being touched. And between them, mortals were the ones who broke. Then there was Hephaestus, the god who married Aphrodite not because she chose him, but because Zeus chose for her. Hephaestus was kind, patient, intelligent, steady. He built wonders with his hands and carried sorrow in his silence. He loved Aphrodite with the slow-burning devotion of a craftsman who shapes metal carefully, but she did not love him. She respected him, perhaps, admired his skill, touched his cheek with affection that felt like pity, but she did not desire him, and Hephaestus knew. Every night he waited for her, and every night she did not come home. The bitterness grew, not against her, against himself, against the truth that the woman he adored someone else. Ares, the god of war, the god of impulse, the god of fire-hearted decisions. Hephaestus, in all his logic, could not compete with that. He tried trapping them, shaming them, displaying their affair before the gods. But all he revealed was his own breaking. No net could cage desire. No trap could force love. No humiliation could erase passion. Hephaestus was a tragic figure not because he was abandoned, but because he believed love was earned by goodness. It wasn't. Not with Aphrodite. He was the husband chosen. Ares was the man she chose. And in that triangle, an entire philosophy of love was born. Aphrodite did not choose the safe option. She chose the option that matched her fire. Ares was chaos. Ares was heat. Ares was fury. Ares was instinct. Ares was everything that ignited her. When they were together, the air changed. Their love was not gentle. It was not delicate. It was not pure. It was passion, raw and consuming. A crackling wildfire, a storm without warning, a collision of desire and destruction. But unlike the others, Ares never tried to control her. He never tried to make her small. He never tried to cage her or define her. He simply matched her. He met her chaos with his, her fire with his, her hunger with his. Ares loved her honestly the only way he knew how. Their affair was not secret, it was not subtle, it was not shameful to them. The gods whispered, the mortals speculated, but neither Ares nor Aphrodite cared, because their love was not political, not strategic, not proper. It was instinctual, elemental, true in a way that terrified the gods who relied on rules. Aphrodite did not belong to Ares. Ares did not belong to Aphrodite. They belonged to the fire between them, and that fire carved through Olympus, shaping myths, shaping wars, shaping stories that mortals would whisper for centuries. This is why Aphrodite's rivalries remained eternal. Hera fought her because Aphrodite unraveled order. Athena fought her because she disrupted logic. Artemis fought her because she disrupted purity. Hephaestus suffered because she disrupted stability. Ares loved her because she reflected the fury in his own heart. And Aphrodite? She fought none of them. She never entered their wars, because her power was older than their arguments. Her influence did not need to swing a weapon or lift a shield. Her influence lived inside the quietest chamber of every immortal being, the heart they thought they had outgrown. Aphrodite showed the gods something they did not wish to admit. They were divine, but they were not immune. Not to love, not to longing, not to jealousy, not to desire, not to the very thing that made them gods worth worshipping, the reflection of humanity inside them. Aphrodite did not weaken Olympus. She revealed Olympus, revealed what lay beneath the thrones and temples, revealed the trembling truth that even gods were vulnerable to the pull of emotion, and that vulnerability frightened them more than any monster or prophecy ever could. So they fought her, quietly, endlessly, inevitably. But she never fought them back. She didn't have to, because in every rivalry, whether queen or warrior or virgin goddess, one truth remained constant. Aphrodite won simply by existing. Her power was not a battle. Her power was a condition of being alive, a condition of being mortal, a condition of being divine, a condition of being anything with a heart capable of beating. Aphrodite did not conquer Olympus. She softened it, bent it, exposed it, awakened it, and in doing so, she became the most dangerous goddess of them all, the goddess every god wished to resist and could not, because no matter how high Olympus stood, no matter how proud its thrones, no matter how unbreakable its laws, Aphrodite ruled the one realm none of them could claim, the realm within, the realm beneath the armor, the realm behind the eyes, the realm where wars begin and end, the realm of feeling. And in that realm, she was eternal. The story of the Trojan War does not begin with ships or swords or kings hungry for conquest. It begins with a wedding not of mortals, but of immortals, Peleus, a mortal hero, and Thetis, the sea nymph destined to be the mother of Achilles. Their union was meant to be a celebration, a shimmering thread of peace woven between worlds. Every god and goddess was invited. Every divine cupbearer carried nectar. Every immortal offered blessings. Every voice lifted in joy. Every presence shined except one, Eris, the goddess of discord, the one no one wanted, the one no one dared to invite. Eris noticed the absence instantly, and in that absence grew a seed of insult, not rage, not vengeance, just a simple desire to remind Olympus that a goddess ignored is a goddess unleashed. Eris did not storm the wedding. She did not scream or curse. She simply tossed an apple, a small, golden apple that glimmered like a sun trapped inside fruit. On its surface, one word was etched, to the fairest. The moment the apple hit the polished floor, the air fractured. Silence cracked open. 3 goddesses froze. 3 sets of immortal eyes found the apple. Hera, queen of the gods. Athena, goddess of wisdom and war strategy. Aphrodite, goddess of love and desire. Each believed the apple was meant for her. Each believed she deserved it. Each believed the inscription was not a question but a truth waiting to be acknowledged. And in that expectation, the discord began. The apple was not a gift, it was a test. A quiet blade, slicing Olympus along its deepest insecurities. Hera demanded recognition as queen. Athena demanded recognition as unmatched in mind and might. Aphrodite did not demand. She simply smiled, because beauty does not need a throne. It demands nothing and receives everything. But the 3 could not agree, so they sought the one being foolish enough, mortal enough, innocent enough to choose among them. Paris of Troy, a shepherd prince exiled from his city and raised among quiet hills, a man known not for power, nor war, nor ambition, only for fairness, for gentleness, for a heart untouched by Olympus, the perfect victim, the perfect judge. Paris did not know the chaos walking toward him. He did not know 3 goddesses would soon stand before him. He did not know his choice would unmake cities. He only knew that one morning, while tending his cattle on Mount Ida, the world grew unnaturally still, and then the air shimmered, and the goddesses appeared. Hera stood tall, regal, the weight of rulership wrapped around her like a cloak of iron. Athena stood sharp and bright, eyes clear as polished bronze, posture rigid with strategy. Aphrodite stood soft and radiant, the breeze itself seeming to lean toward her. Paris fell to his knees, not in worship, not in fear, but in confusion. The goddesses wasted no time. They presented the golden apple. They asked him to choose. He hesitated, terrified. Choosing beauty among mortals was difficult. Choosing beauty among goddesses was fatal. So Hera stepped forward first. She offered him power. She promised dominion over all of Asia and Europe. She promised him a kingdom that would eclipse every throne. She promised him the fate of king's reach, legacy, command. She would make him the most powerful man alive. Paris felt the weight of her promise. But Athena approached next. She offered him wisdom, not mere knowledge, but mastery of battle, skill that would make him invincible, honor that would make him immortal in song, glory that would carve his name across centuries. She promised him victory, strategy, the brilliance of a mind sharpened into legend. Paris trembled. 2 goddesses, 2 futures, 2 crowns. Then Aphrodite stepped forward. She offered nothing grand, nothing political, nothing carved from divine authority. She simply whispered, "I will give you the love of the most beautiful woman in the world, Helen of Sparta, a queen, a woman whose beauty poets had not yet found words for, a woman married, unavailable, unreachable, except through Aphrodite." And Paris felt something impossible, not logic, not ambition, not even desire, a pull, something soft and ancient awakening inside him. Hera's power dazzled, Athena's glory tempted, but Aphrodite's gift reached the part of him untouched by reason, not the mind, not the crown, the heart. And in that heartbeat, the future rewrote itself. Paris placed the golden apple into Aphrodite's hand, and the world cracked open. Because her gift was beauty, her consequence was war. Helen left Sparta. Paris sailed home with her. The Greeks raged, and the gods took sides. Not for justice, not for destiny, but for pride wounded by a shepherd's choice. Aphrodite stood firmly with Paris, with Troy, with the love she had promised. She shielded Paris in battle. When he faced Menelaus, Helen's furious husband, Paris would have died instantly, but Aphrodite swept him away in a cloud of mist. She whisked him into his bedroom, safe, breathless, humiliated but alive. Hera saw this and burned with contempt. Athena saw this and sharpened her spear. Aphrodite had won the apple, but the others would win the war. Still, Aphrodite did not step back. She protected Paris not out of strategy. She protected him because his survival upheld her promise. Her word was part of the fabric of fate, and she would not let it break. But Paris was not her only concern. Her son Aeneas fought on the Trojan side, a warrior destined not for Troy's glory, but for its ashes. And when Aeneas fell beneath the spear of Diomedes, Aphrodite rushed to him. She descended, soft as starlight, reaching for her wounded son. But Diomedes, empowered by Athena herself, lifted his blade and struck her. A mortal struck a goddess. The pain was immediate, sharp, disorienting. Not the pain of flesh, the pain of vulnerability, the pain of being reminded she was not invincible. She cried out, dropping Aeneas, retreating in a streak of shimmering light. Blood ichor, golden and luminous, dripped from her wrist. She fled to Olympus, collapsing into her mother Dione's arms, trembling with humiliation. The gods laughed. A goddess of love wounded on a battlefield. A goddess of beauty stained by war. But they forgot something. Pain does not weaken love. It deepens it. Aphrodite healed, returned, and continued to protect Aeneas. When Troy burned, she shielded him from fire. When the Greeks slaughtered the last defenders, she opened a path for him. When he fled carrying his father on his back, she lit the road ahead. Her power was not the spear. It was survival, not victory. Continuity. Through Aeneas, she carried Troy into the future, into Rome, into empire. Her influence began a war, but her influence also built a civilization, yet the gods did not care for this nuance. What they saw was the chaos blossoming from Aphrodite's apple. Hera's wrath turned relentless. Athena's vengeance sharpened with every Greek victory. And Aphrodite, caught between longing and legacy, kept choosing emotion over order, because she could not be anything else. The Trojan War, in all its brutality, was not a story of kings. It was a story of a choice. One choice, one apple, one moment of desire. Aphrodite had given Paris the love he craved, but in doing so, she set the world on fire. Still, her presence on the battlefield was not violent. It was tender. She appeared in flashes of soft light. She held wounded warriors. She wrapped Paris in veils of protection. She guided Aeneas through collapsing walls. She saved what she could. She mourned what she couldn't, even when mocked, even when wounded, even when the world blamed her. Because desire is rarely forgiven for its consequences, and love is never thanked for the wars it prevents, only blamed for the wars it begins. Aphrodite was not blind to the destruction. She saw mothers scream for sons. She saw brothers die holding brothers. She saw smoke, ash, ruin, but she also saw the threads beneath the chaos, the futures forming quietly behind the flames. The future where Aeneas would escape. The future where Rome would rise. The future where beauty would be remembered long after war songs faded. Aphrodite's role in the Trojan War was not that of a warrior. It was that of a force that shaped decisions, a force that shaped destinies, a force that shaped every soft thought that made hard men tremble. She protected Paris, though the world judged him a coward. She protected Aeneas, though fate demanded exile. She protected love itself, though war tried to devour it. For her gift was beauty. Her consequence was war. But beauty survives. War does not. When the fires of Troy sank into embers, the gods moved on. Hera returned to her throne. Athena returned to her strategies. Ares returned to his battlefields. But Aphrodite lingered. She lingered among the ruins, among the broken walls, among the women kneeling in ash, among the silent corpses of heroes once praised. She lingered because love does not walk away from devastation. It learns it. It carries it. It transforms it. She whispered to Aeneas as he lifted his father. She whispered to the surviving Trojans who followed him. She whispered to the child yet unborn who would build Rome. Her whisper carried the last breath of a city and planted it into the soil of a new world. That is why the judgment of Paris mattered. Not because a shepherd chose a goddess, not because a queen chose a lover, not because a war erupted, but because that choice, that apple shaped centuries, shaped empires, shaped memory. From a wedding that excluded one goddess, to an apple that tempted three others, to a choice made by a single man, to a city burning, to an exile escaping, to a future rising. Aphrodite was in every step, not as a villain, not as a saint, but as the inevitable force she was born to be. The force that makes kings reckless, the force that makes warriors gentle, the force that makes empires rise from ashes, the force that makes humans human. Her gift was beauty, her consequence was war. But her legacy, her true legacy, was everything that came after the fire. The quiet rebuilding, the tender beginnings, the next heartbeat, the next story, the next world. Mortals never expected the gods to notice them, let alone touch their lives in ways that echoed across centuries. And yet Aphrodite, more than any other Olympian, stepped quietly into the lives of mortals who never asked for glory, never sought legend, never wished to become the center of a myth. She came to them not with thunder, not with divine warnings, but with the soft weight of emotion, the kind that changes a life without leaving a visible mark. This chapter is not about kingdoms or battles. It is about small beginnings that unfolded into vast stories. 3 mortals, 3 fates, 3 threads of love that wove themselves into history. Anchises, Pygmalion, Adonis, each touched by Aphrodite in ways different and unforgettable. And through them, she changed the world. Let us begin with Anchises, the shepherd prince who never imagined the goddess of love would descend from Olympus simply to meet him. Anchises lived a quiet life on the slopes of Mount Ida, far from the noise of cities and the intrigues of kings. He tended his cattle, he walked among wildflowers, he slept under the whispering leaves of ancient trees. He was not a hero, not a warrior, not a ruler, just a man. But Zeus, weary of Aphrodite's triumph over the hearts of gods and mortals alike, decided she should taste her own power. He wanted her to feel longing. He wanted her to feel helpless. He wanted her to fall in love. So he struck her with desire, not cruelly, but ironically for a mortal man. And Aphrodite, who had made kings kneel and heroes falter, found herself overwhelmed by something she had so often commanded. She descended from Olympus, disguised as a mortal woman, radiant but human enough to be approached without fear. Anchises saw her walking through the tall grass, barefoot, sunlight clinging to her hair like strands of gold. He did not know who she was. He thought she was a princess, a vision, a dream carried by the wind. When she spoke, her voice was gentle as the breeze that moved through the shepherd's fields. She told him she had wandered far. She told him she had been separated from her attendants. She told him she needed shelter. Anchises, kind and humble, offered her his home, a small wooden dwelling warmed by the scent of earth and cattle. He offered her food, water, comfort, and without knowing it, he offered her something more. He offered her sincerity. Aphrodite felt the pull of longing deepen. For the first time, she felt unsure. Not because she lacked beauty, but because she desired something she could not command. Anchises touched her hand, not as one touches a goddess, but as one touches a woman, gently, curiously, reverently. And Aphrodite, overwhelmed by the very force she ruled, allowed herself to love him. Their night together was quiet, tender, wrapped in a stillness that felt both ancient and new. No thunder, no divine spectacle, just two beings sharing breath in the soft hours before dawn. When morning light rose over the hills, Anchises awoke to find Aphrodite not as a mortal woman, but in her true, shimmering form, radiant, otherworldly, unmistakably divine. He fell to the ground, trembling, certain he would be punished for lying with a goddess. But Aphrodite did not punish him. She touched his face gently and told him the truth. He would live. He would not be harmed. And from their union, a child would be born, a child destined for greatness. Aeneas, Anchises, did not yet understand the weight of that name, but the world would, for Aeneas would survive the fall of Troy. He would escape the burning city guided by his mother's invisible hand. He would carry his father on his back through smoke and ruin. He would sail across oceans in search of a new home, and his descendants, through story, through empire, through centuries, would build Rome. Julius Caesar himself would claim ancestry from Venus, the Roman name for Aphrodite, through Aeneas. The love of a goddess for a shepherd became the foundation of nations. A quiet night became the seed of an empire. Anchises never asked for immortality in story, but love placed him there. Aphrodite changed his life with tenderness, not tragedy. But not all mortals touched by her were changed gently. Some found solace, some found sorrow, and some found transformation in ways deeper than the body. Pygmalion was a sculptor who lived far from war, far from politics, far from the noise of temples crowded with offerings. He was a man devoted to beauty, not the kind that walked through markets or lingered in the eyes of strangers, but the kind that lived in marble and imagination. Pygmalion had grown disillusioned with the women around him, not because they were flawed, but because they felt distant from the ideal he carried in his mind. He sought purity of form, harmony of line, perfection of soul, and so he turned to his craft, carving the woman he believed the world could not offer him. He worked for days, months, seasons, his hands shaping ivory into curves impossibly soft, impossibly alive. He spoke to the statue while he worked, not as an artist to stone, but as a lonely heart reaching toward the possibility of connection. He named her nothing. She existed beyond names. A figure of idealized beauty resting in his workshop, illuminated by slants of afternoon sun. He dressed her, caressed her hands, whispered to her in the quiet hours when loneliness grows heavy enough to break a man. And yet she was stone, cold, unmoving, silent. Pygmalion felt devotion become ache, longing become wound. He did not ask for love. He asked for companionship in a world that had grown too sharp for his tender spirit. One night, during the festival of Aphrodite, he walked to her altar carrying no grand offering, only a simple prayer, a quiet request. He asked not for wealth, or fame, or a mortal bride of surpassing beauty. He asked for someone like the statue he had shaped, someone gentle, someone worthy of the love he had held in silence for too long. Aphrodite heard him. She always heard longing the sincere, aching kind. She visited his workshop that night, unseen. She touched the statue, her fingertips warm against cold ivory, and the stone softened. The lips warmed, the eyes shimmered, the chest rose with breath. The statue became real. When Pygmalion returned, he reached out to brush dust from her hand and felt warmth where there should have been none. The statue turned toward him, looked at him, smiled softly, as though she had known him forever. He fell to his knees, overwhelmed by gratitude, grief, and disbelief. Aphrodite had not punished his longing. She had answered it. Galatea, the name later given to the statue, became his wife, not as an object of perfection, but as a partner, a living soul, a woman whose first breath in the world was given by love itself. Their story did not build empires. It built happiness. And Aphrodite, who had seen so much chaos born of desire, cherished the rare peace of a love that healed instead of destroyed. But love is never simple, never predictable, never safe. And no mortal showed that truth more painfully than Adonis. If Aphrodite ever loved anyone with both her heart and her grief, it was him. Adonis was beautiful beyond mortal comparison. Not with the sculpted perfection of Galatea, not with the sturdy kindness of Anchises, but with the fragile brilliance of youth, the kind that fades too quickly, the kind that glows brightest before it breaks. Some myths say Aphrodite found him as a child, born from the tragic transformation of his mother, Mira. Others say she met him grown, a hunter whose footsteps disturbed the stillness of the forest in ways that made even Artemis look twice. But all myths agree on one thing. Aphrodite loved him, deeply, fiercely, with a tenderness she had never allowed herself to feel. Adonis awakened something vulnerable in her. He softened her laughter. He slowed her steps. He made her linger in quiet moments. He made her human. She followed him through forests, whispering warnings when he hunted. She begged him not to chase dangerous beasts. She knew love could not protect a man from death. But Adonis, young and fearless, believed in immortality simply because he had not yet met mortality. He kissed her hands, promised caution, and ran into the trees anyway. One morning, the world shifted. The birds grew silent. The air tasted like iron. Aphrodite felt a pain bloom in her chest, sharp, sudden, unmistakable. She ran. Branches tore her skin, roots scraped her legs, but she ran. She found Adonis lying among crushed leaves, a boar's tusk wound blooming red across his hip, his chest, his thigh. His breath was shallow, his eyes dimming. Aphrodite collapsed beside him, her hands trembling as she tried to hold life inside his body. She called him back with every name she had whispered to him in love. But death does not bargain, not even with a goddess. Adonis died in her arms. The earth, moved by her grief, transformed his blood into anemone flowers, soft, red, trembling in the slightest wind. They became symbols of fragile love, symbols of how quickly beauty disappears, symbols of how deeply longing can wound. Aphrodite wept for him, not as a goddess, as a woman who had lost the one she loved. Her tears mixed with his blood, and the flowers bloomed brighter, petal by petal, memory by memory. Her grief became a ritual, a mourning, a story told by women in ancient times who planted small gardens of Adonis seeds that sprouted quickly and withered just as fast, a reminder of how love burns and how love breaks. Aphrodite's story with Adonis is the closest she ever came to mortality, not through her body, through her heart, for it showed her that even a goddess can feel loss that reshapes eternity. These mortals, Anchises, Pygmalion, Adonis, did not worship her, they did not chase her, they did not seek immortality, they simply lived. And in living, they crossed her path. And in crossing her path, they changed her. Because love, whether divine or mortal, always leaves a mark. Aphrodite shaped their lives, but they shaped her just as deeply. Anchises showed her tenderness, Pygmalion showed her devotion, Adonis showed her fragility. Together they formed the human side of a goddess the world often misunderstood. Aphrodite is remembered for beauty, but she should be remembered for this: she loved. She grieved, she healed, she hurt, and through mortals, she learned that even gods cannot escape the truths of the heart. Aphrodite's connection to mortals did not end with love or longing. It extended into the quiet spaces where emotion becomes memory, where memory becomes myth, and where myth becomes the invisible force that shapes entire worlds. Anchises, Pygmalion, and Adonis were not chosen for their power. They were chosen for their humanity, for the softness they carried, for the open places in the heart that even gods found themselves circling like moths around a flame. Anchises showed her what it meant to desire gently. Pygmalion showed her what it meant to desire faithfully. Adonis showed her what it meant to desire painfully. And in each of them, she learned something new, not about mortals, but about herself. For though she was born from foam or from the king of gods, depending on which story you tell, Aphrodite's true origin was neither sea nor sky. Her origin lived inside longing, inside ache, inside the quiet desperation that every mortal carries and many hide. These mortals gave her mirrors she had never owned. Anchises taught her vulnerability. Pygmalion taught her devotion's gentleness. Adonis taught her grief's depth. But the story stretches even further, because each of these men became more than individuals. They became symbols. Anchises became the ancestor of empires. Pygmalion became the embodiment of creative love. Adonis became the eternal motif of beauty lost too soon. Anchises loved her for one night. The world loved the child born from that night for thousands of years. Aphrodite watched Aeneas grow. She watched him rise through the smoke of Troy, shielded by her soft, unseen hand. She watched him carry his father through the chaos, muscles trembling, eyes burning with determination and sorrow. She watched him become more than a prince. She watched him become a bridge between worlds, the ending of one and the beginning of another. Aeneas became a wanderer of fate, a vessel carrying memories of a city that no longer existed, a soul who walked with ruin behind him and destiny before him. And Aphrodite never left him. She guided his steps, though he could not see her. She softened the storms that could have drowned him. She quieted the winds that could have broken his ships. She illuminated the paths that could have swallowed him in darkness, not because she was saving a hero, but because she was saving a legacy born out of tenderness. She did for Aeneas what she could not do for Adonis, protect him from an ending too soon. Through Aeneas, Rome claimed its divine mother. Through Aeneas, Julius Caesar traced his lineage to a goddess. Through Aeneas, Aphrodite became immortal, not through temples or worship, but through the bloodlines of human history. Her love for Anchises began it. Her grief for Troy solidified it. Her protection of Aeneas carried it into eternity. And so the world that rose from Rome carried a piece of Aphrodite in every law, every sculpture, every story written under its empire's shadow. Pygmalion's story unfolded in quieter ways. His transformation was not of nations, but of intimacy. His myth spread not through armies, but through hearts seeking hope. When Aphrodite brought Galatea to life, she did something rare for a goddess. She transformed longing into fulfillment. That transformation created a new kind of myth, a myth where love heals instead of wounds, where devotion is rewarded instead of punished, where the ideal becomes real not through conquest, but through sincerity. Pygmalion's devotion was not the dramatic kind sung in epics. It was the silent kind, the aching kind, the steady kind, the type of love that grows in the shadows of solitude. And by granting that love life, Aphrodite reshaped how mortals understood desire. She showed them that longing could create beauty. That beauty could become a companion. That companionship could be crafted from vulnerability. Galatea's first breath was a promise that not all longing ends in ruin, that not all desire is punished, that creation itself can be an act of love. The myth of Pygmalion spread across generations as a quiet reassurance. Each retelling carved soft lines into the human imagination, lines that whispered, "How you love shapes the world you live in." And then there was Adonis, the one myth Aphrodite never escaped, the one love that lingered like a bruise across her immortal heart. Adonis embodied youth in its most fragile form, beautiful, bright, unaware of danger, unaware of mortality, unaware that his brilliance made him vulnerable to the very earth he loved to walk upon. Aphrodite cherished him in a way she had not cherished anyone. She saw in him a reflection of beauty unburdened by expectation, raw beauty, innocent beauty, beauty untouched by fear. She followed him not because she needed to protect him, but because she needed to remember what it meant to be moved. Adonis laughed easily. He ran freely. He hunted boldly. He loved gently. Each of these things terrified Aphrodite, for she knew the world too well. She had seen how quickly beauty fades, how quickly life evaporates, how swiftly mortality claims what it was never promised to keep. So she warned him, again and again and again. He smiled at her worry. He held her hand. He whispered reassurances. But reassurance cannot stop destiny. The forest does not soften for beauty. The boar does not pause for love. The earth does not hesitate for grief. When the boar struck him, death entered quickly. Blood blossomed across his skin like crimson petals. His breath faded, his warmth dimmed, and Aphrodite arrived too late to save him. She held him as though her embrace could pull him back. She pressed her face into his neck as though prayer could restore breath. She begged the earth, the sky, the fates, but none answered. Her tears fell onto his skin, mixing with his blood. From that mixture, the anemone flower grew, fragile, delicate, short-lived, red as grief, born from pain, blooming only to remind the world how quickly love can disappear. Women of ancient cities planted fast-sprouting gardens in his memory. They watched them bloom quickly. They watched them die just as fast. They mourned him, but they mourned something else too. They mourned the truth that beauty cannot stay, that youth cannot last, that love does not come without risk, that loss is the shadow following every heartbeat. Aphrodite learned this lesson too well. And though gods do not age, they can suffer. Adonis became her wound, a wound that never closed, a reminder that divine love is not protection, it is exposure. It is vulnerability. It is the willingness to feel deeply even when the ending is already written. Through Anchises, she learned tenderness. Through Pygmalion, she learned devotion. Through Adonis, she learned loss. 3 mortals, 3 windows into the human soul. 3 reflections that shaped the goddess more profoundly than any war, any apple, any divine rivalry. Mortals worshipped her. But mortals also changed her. They softened her. They wounded her. They taught her the things Olympus never could. And because of them, her divinity became deeper, more nuanced, more human. Aphrodite was the goddess of love, but mortals taught her what love actually meant. Anchises taught her its humility. Pygmalion taught her its hope. Adonis taught her its heartbreak. And through them, she learned the entire spectrum of longing, from creation to loss, from devotion to grief, from touch to absence. Their stories did not shape only her, they shaped the world. They shaped myth. They shaped the hearts of those who told their tales in whisper and memory. And in the quiet hours of night, when prayers drifted upward like faint embers, Aphrodite listened differently because of them. She listened not as an untouchable goddess, but as someone who had loved deeply, hurt deeply, and understood the fragile nature of the human heart. These mortals, Anchises, Pygmalion, Adonis, were not chosen by fate. They were chosen by feeling, and feeling has always been the true domain of Aphrodite. But Aphrodite's story with mortals did not end with love or grief. It extended far beyond the moments she shared with Anchises, Pygmalion, and Adonis. For the lives she touched became more than memories. They became echoes, echoes that shaped cultures and rituals, and the emotional architecture of the ancient world. Anchises taught her that love could create a future larger than any heart intended. Through him she learned that tenderness could be inherited. Aeneas inherited it. Rome inherited it. and the world inherited Rome. Aphrodite often watched mortals from afar, but Anchises made her walk into their world, made her feel the uneven earth, made her feel fear when she revealed herself. Fear for him, fear of harming him, fear of losing him. For a goddess who had inspired so much vulnerability in others, discovering her own was a kind of awakening. That awakening did not disappear. Aphrodite carried it into every moment she watched Aeneas. Every storm she softened for him. Every night he prayed without knowing she stood beside him. Every time he doubted his destiny. Every time he missed Troy so fiercely he couldn't breathe. She saw those moments, and in them she saw Anchises. She saw her own tenderness reflected back to her in the way Aeneas held on to hope. And she understood then that love never dies with the person who first inspired it. It continues through suns, through stories, through the quiet determination to keep moving forward. Aeneas carried his father out of Troy, but he also carried Aphrodite's lesson. Love may break you, but it also makes you. Pygmalion taught Aphrodite that longing could create beauty, not the beauty that dazzles, but the kind that heals. He loved a statue before she breathed, not because he was delusional, not because he sought perfection, but because he saw in her the gentleness he could not find in the world. He loved the idea of someone who would not wound him, someone who would not walk away, someone whose first breath would be shaped by devotion, not disappointment. And Aphrodite answered that longing because it came from a place inside him that was soft, unguarded, honest. Galatea's awakening became one of the quiet miracles Aphrodite cherished most. No war was stopped. No empire was born. No hero rose from their union. Just love, calm, domestic, peaceful. A small miracle that rippled through centuries of storytelling. Mortals would tell and retell this tale, not for glory, but for comfort. Because deep down, people feared loneliness more than death. Pygmalion showed them that loneliness could be transformed, that devotion could be answered, that beauty could be shaped by hands that trembled from passion, not from power. And Aphrodite, who had seen longing twisted into tragedy so many times, held this story gently. As if it were a fragile glass she refused to drop. Adonis, however, taught her something no mortal had ever taught a goddess so profoundly. Grief. Raw, unfiltered, devastating grief. Aphrodite had seen mortals mourn before. She had watched queens collapse on the bodies of fallen kings, watched children cry for mothers who would never return, watched heroes stare blankly at their own wounds, realizing they were mortal after all. But she had never felt it. Not like this, not like a knife being slowly pushed into the center of her chest. When Adonis died in her arms, part of her divine detachment died with him. She was immortal. He was not. She was eternal. He was temporary. And the world reminded her of that difference with a cruelty she never forgot. She screamed when he died. The sound was not divine. It was human, raw, cracked, trembling with heartbreak. The anemone flowers that bloomed from his blood were as delicate as the memories she kept of him. Short-lived, beautiful, gone too soon. And in the centuries that followed, women planted their gardens of Adonis, fast-growing seeds, quick blooms, swift decay. A ritual not of celebration, but of mourning. A ritual born from Aphrodite's pain. A ritual that allowed mortals to touch the goddess grief through their own hands. Every withered leaf was a reminder that beauty is temporary. Every dying blossom a reminder that love is brave because it ends. These three stories, Anchises, Pygmalion, Adonis, carried Aphrodite across the spectrum of human experience. Through them she felt tenderness and creation and loss. Through them she learned emotions the other gods mocked and feared. Zeus feared love because it unraveled reason. Hera feared love because it unraveled marriage. Athena feared love because it unraveled strategy. Artemis feared love because it unraveled purity. Ares feared love because it unraveled war. But Aphrodite feared love because it unraveled her. She, who had made the world tremble, trembled for mortals. She, who had shaped hearts, was shaped by them. She, who had broken kings, was broken by a boy whose smile she could not protect from fate. And yet, if given the choice, she would not have changed it. For pain made her deeper, grief made her kinder, devotion made her gentler, and love made her divine. Mortals prayed to her for many things: for lovers to return, for marriages to survive, for beauty to bloom, for loneliness to fade. But the truth they never knew was this: Aphrodite prayed for them too. Not in shrines, not in temples, not in words, but in the quiet way she watched over their fragile lives. The same way she watched Aeneas escape Troy. The same way she watched Pygmalion find companionship in creation. The same way she watched Adonis sleep beside her, unaware of the tragedy waiting for him. Mortals changed her. Not through heroism, not through worship, through vulnerability, and she learned to love them because they felt emotions fully, without immortal detachment, without divine pride, without the armor of eternity. Mortals hurt because they lived. Mortals loved because they feared loss. Mortals cried because their hearts were too soft for the sharp edges of the world. Aphrodite envied that. Envied the preciousness of every mortal moment. Envied the meaning that mortality gathered around even the smallest gestures. A hand held, a kiss shared, a promise whispered, a goodbye that a god would never need to say. She watched mortals break and rebuild themselves over and over again. Watched them wake after heartbreak. Watched them love again after loss. Watched them carry grief like a quiet lantern inside their chests. And for the first time, the goddess of love understood that love was not just desire, it was endurance. A refusal to stop feeling despite the pain. Anchises endured. Pygmalion endured. Adonis, even in death, endured through the flowers that carried his story. And Aphrodite, shaped by these three, carried their lessons back to Olympus. She stood differently, softer, more aware, more human in the ways gods were never meant to be. The immortals noticed. Some mocked her for it. Hera looked at her with cold disdain for growing sentimental. Athena looked at her with curiosity, trying to dissect emotion like a puzzle. Artemis kept her distance, uneasy with the depth of Aphrodite's grief. Ares, strangely understood for war, had given him his own share of ghosts. And Hephaestus, in the quiet corners of his forge, wondered whether heartbreak might finally make him worthy of her gaze. But Aphrodite did not seek their approval. She sought meaning, and she found it in the mortals, who had changed her more than any god ever could. Anchises carved a path through history. Pygmalion carved beauty into life. Adonis carved grief into eternity. Three mortals shaped by love. Three mortals shaping love in return. Three mortals who taught a goddess what it means to feel. And centuries later, when their stories became myth, and myth became memory, and memory became the quiet hum beneath the world, Aphrodite remained. She remained in the tenderness of a parent holding a child. She remained in the quiet devotion of a sculptor shaping art from longing. She remained in the tremble of a first kiss, in the ache of a last goodbye, in the grief that blooms like flowers in the chest, in the hope that grows again despite it all. For Aphrodite does not live in temples or altars. She lives in the human heart, in its breaking, in its healing, in its endless yearning, in its fragile courage. Anchises, Pygmalion, Adonis. Three mortals, three stories, one truth. Love changes the world. Love changes the gods. Love changes everything it touches. And nothing shaped Aphrodite more than the mortals who loved her and the mortals she loved in return. Even after the stories of Anchises, Pygmalion, and Adonis drifted into myth, Aphrodite's presence did not fade from the world. If anything, it grew stronger not in Olympus, but in the hands, hearts, and homes of the mortals who walked beneath her unseen gaze. Because love, longing, devotion, tenderness, grief, and desire were not things mortals felt only in stories. They were realities. They were everyday experiences. They were the quiet pulse beneath the surface of human life. And so mortals built temples to her, not out of fear, not out of obligation, but out of understanding. For no goddess lived closer to the mortal heart than Aphrodite. Her temples rose where longing was strongest, on islands kissed by the sea, in cities that pulsed with life, on hilltops where sailors prayed for calm tides, in gardens where lovers whispered to themselves before confessing. And of all the places that worshipped her, none carried her presence more deeply than the island of Cyprus. Cyprus was her cradle, her homecoming, her first shore, according to the oldest myths. This is where she stepped from the sea foam, carried gently by the tide. Here, in the ancient city of Paphos, her greatest sanctuary stood, not a small shrine, not a humble altar, but a sprawling sacred complex where pilgrims traveled across oceans to honor her. The sanctuary of Aphrodite at Paphos was not built to intimidate. It was built to welcome. White stone courtyards opened beneath the sun like outstretched hands. Incense drifted through the air in soft spirals. Bird song mingled with whispered prayers. And everywhere, one could feel the peace that settles when longing is acknowledged rather than denied. Priests and priestesses tended to the sanctuary with devotion. They prepared offerings of flowers, oil, and sweet incense. They guided pilgrims who came seeking love, reconciliation, fertility, or clarity. And during festivals, the entire island seemed to bloom. The Aphrodisia, her great celebration, filled the sanctuary with music, dancing, and ritual bathing of her ancient stone symbol. The statue was not a woman with perfect features. It was a pillar, a simple, aniconic form. Because in Paphos, Aphrodite was not worshipped as a body. She was worshipped as a presence, a force, a spirit woven into the sea breeze, the flowers, the sound of waves brushing the shore. The festival began with purification. Priestesses washed her sacred stone with seawater. They anointed it with oils. They crowned it with garlands of fresh myrtle and roses, plants that pulsed with her essence. Then the city celebrated. Mothers prayed for children. Lovers prayed for harmony. Fishermen prayed for calm waters. Young women offered locks of hair before marriage. Young men offered small carvings, symbolizing hope and tenderness. And through it all, the atmosphere was gentle, never severe. Aphrodite's worship was not about punishment. It was about belonging. It was about the quiet bravery of asking for love, the vulnerability of admitting desire, the hope of seeking connection. But Cyprus was not the only place where Aphrodite's presence shaped the landscape. Another city carried her worship into a different direction, Corinth. Perched between two seas, Corinth was a city of travelers, merchants, wanderers, and seekers. It was a crossroads of the ancient world, and at the top of its high acropolis stood the Temple of Aphrodite. This temple held a reputation unlike any other, wrapped in centuries of rumor, exaggeration, misunderstanding, and imagination. Ancient writers claimed that priestesses of Aphrodite practiced sacred intimacy, serving both the goddess and the people who came seeking solace. Whether this was true in the literal sense or embellished by rival cities, one thing was certain. Corinth's worship of Aphrodite celebrated connection without shame. Here she was not Aphrodite of the sea foam or Aphrodite of heavenly love. She was Aphrodite Pandemos, Aphrodite of the people, of the crowd, of the everyday longing that lives inside every passerby. Travelers arrived weary from journey and loneliness. Merchants arrived hardened by negotiation and the hunger for companionship. Soldiers arrived needing tenderness after months of battle. Priestesses welcomed them with rituals meant to soothe, not scandalize soft conversation, perfumed oils, music that quieted the mind, and ceremonies that reminded humans of their own worthiness of affection. Corinth's worship of Aphrodite did not hide from desire. It honored it, not as sin, not as shame, but as a necessary part of being alive. The rituals were not wild, not indulgent. They were healing, private, intimate in the way kindness can be intimate. And the goddess who presided over them was not judgmental. She was compassionate. She understood the human ache better than any god of thunder or prophecy ever could. But if Cyprus worshipped her birth, and Corinth worshipped her closeness to the human heart, Athens worshipped her highest form, Aphrodite Urania. Heavenly Aphrodite, Aphrodite of spiritual love, of harmony, of connection beyond physical longing. In Athens, where philosophy grew like olive trees and minds sharpened like bronze, Aphrodite took on a refined shape. Here she was celebrated as the goddess who elevated love from impulse to inspiration. Athenians built her a temple near the ancient agora, where citizens debated ideas and imagined the future of knowledge. Her statue did not show seduction, it showed serenity. She stood calm, dignified, representing clarity of affection rather than passion's blaze. Lovers prayed to her for steady hearts. Married couples prayed to her for trust. Young people prayed to her for the wisdom to choose love that would last. Philosophers wrote about her dual nature, one Aphrodite of the body, one Aphrodite of the soul. And in this duality, she mirrored human experience, the longing we feel in our bones, and the connection we feel in our spirit. Athens embraced the latter. Athens honored the idea that love could guide the mind toward truth, loyalty, and virtue. But not all Greek cities worshipped Aphrodite in gentle stillness. Some worshipped her in strength. Sparta, the land of warriors, discipline, and unyielding resolve, also had a place for the goddess of love. But not the Aphrodite of roses, not the Aphrodite of longing glances. Sparta revered Aphrodite Aria, Aphrodite of courage, Aphrodite of devotion, Aphrodite who stood beside warriors preparing for battle. In Sparta, love was not softness, love was loyalty, love was commitment to comrades, love was the force that made a soldier return home or die trying. Her temple in Sparta was adorned not with flowers, but with symbols of unity and determination. Before marching into war, soldiers prayed not for passion but for courage born of love, love for their families, love for their city, love for the warriors who fought beside them. For even in the heart of battle, Aphrodite had a place not as desire, but as devotion, as the unseen force that keeps soldiers standing when their knees tremble, as the memory that burns brighter than fear, as the bond that refuses to break even under iron and fire. Each city saw Aphrodite differently because each city understood love differently. Cyprus saw her as the miracle of birth. Corinth saw her as the balm for loneliness. Athens saw her as the harmony of the soul. Sparta saw her as the courage found in devotion. Yet across all of Greece, beyond temples and festivals, Aphrodite lived most vividly in the small daily rituals of ordinary people. In the comb, a young woman passed through her hair before meeting someone she wished to impress. In the rose petals, a husband scattered quietly on the floor for his wife after an argument they both regretted. In the polished bronze mirror, a girl lifted to examine her reflection, wondering whether someone she cared about would find her beautiful. In the myrtle wreath a bride placed on her head the night before her wedding, whispering for harmony and understanding. In the dove-shaped pendant a widow kept near her heart while mourning a love she would never forget. In the small oil lamps lit by travelers before setting out to sea, asking for safe passage and a warm reunion. In the offerings of fruit, flowers, ribbons, and handwritten prayers left at tiny shrines built not by priests but by hands that needed hope. Because Aphrodite was the goddess who walked beside everyone, not above them. She was not distant like Zeus, not fearsome like Poseidon, not severe like Hera, not strategic like Athena, not wild like Artemis, not violent like Ares. She was present, she was intimate, she was human in her knowing of them. Mortals prayed to her with honesty they rarely showed the other gods. They prayed for things they could not tell anyone else, for someone to return their feelings, for a marriage to heal, for a lover to come home safely, for the courage to confess, for the strength to let go, for the clarity to see beauty in themselves when the world refused to. Her temples held these prayers, but so did bedrooms, gardens, streets, and shorelines. Anywhere longing existed, Aphrodite existed. Anywhere tenderness blossomed, she blossomed. Anywhere grief took root, she knelt beside it like a quiet guardian. Even when worship changed, even when empires rose and fell, even when new gods came, Aphrodite remained. For she was not simply the goddess of love, she was the goddess of the human experience itself, the heart's softest places, the mind's unspoken hopes, the bonds that outlast time, the vulnerabilities that shape destinies. Her sanctuaries in Cyprus, Corinth, Athens, and Sparta were reflections, not prisons. Each one revealed a different facet of her. Each one revealed a different truth about love, and every mortal who stepped inside them carried home a piece of her presence. A presence that whispered, "You deserve tenderness. You deserve connection. You deserve beauty in your life. You deserve to be loved not because you are perfect, but because you feel." And that whisper echoed across centuries, through myth, through ritual, through art, through memory, through every heart that ever beat with longing. Aphrodite's temples may crumble, her rituals may fade, her festivals may be forgotten by time, but her influence, quiet, soft, eternal, lives on in the most sacred place she ever claimed, the human heart. Aphrodite's presence was never limited to temples, worshippers, or myths whispered in ancient halls. Her essence lived in symbols, small, delicate, enduring reminders of what she brought into the world. Symbols that carried her across oceans, across generations, across hearts. Symbols that mortals could hold, touch, wear, offer, or simply keep close in moments when tenderness felt fragile. Each symbol was a doorway into her truth. Each symbol carried a lesson. Each symbol revealed a part of her that words alone could not hold. And when night grew quiet and the world softened, these symbols spoke gently to those who needed them. Let us begin with the dove. A simple bird, soft feathers, gentle flight. A creature that never fights for dominance, never rules by force, never seeks conquest. The dove represented loyalty, not the kind demanded by law, but the kind chosen willingly. Doves mate for life. They return to the same partner season after season, year after year. Their devotion is quiet but unwavering. And so Aphrodite claimed the dove as a living embodiment of faithfulness. In ancient times, lovers released doves at weddings. Travelers carried carvings of doves to remind themselves of someone waiting at home. Widows kept small dove-shaped pendants near their hearts, believing Aphrodite would carry their grief gently. Where the dove flew, loyalty followed. Not the fiery loyalty of war, but the soft, enduring loyalty of love that stays. Myrtle, the evergreen plant, was another sacred symbol. Its leaves never withered. Its scent was subtle but comforting. Its branches were woven into garlands for brides and offerings for Aphrodite's altars. Myrtle represented devotion, steady, evergreen, patient, the kind of devotion that grows quietly over time, that deepens rather than fades, that endures seasons of change without breaking. In the sanctuaries of Cyprus, myrtle wreaths were placed upon her aniconic stone. In Athens, young women braided myrtle into their hair to ask for emotional clarity and lasting love. Myrtle softened the spaces where longing lived. It reminded worshippers that devotion is not noise, Devotion is consistency, a silent promise repeated day after day. Then there was the rose, her most famous flower, but also her most misunderstood. To many, the rose symbolized beauty, but to Aphrodite, it symbolized the full truth of beauty. The bloom and the thorn, the softness and the sting, the desire and the danger. The rose was not merely beautiful, it was honest. It showed mortals that beauty is not harmless, that love is not gentle without cost, that longing often arrives with risks hidden beneath its petals. Aphrodite favored roses not because they were perfect, but because they carried duality, the same duality she carried in her own stories. Roses crowned brides, roses honored lovers, roses marked graves, because love lives in birth and endings alike. The mirror was another symbol, not of vanity, as many believed, but of truth. Mortals feared their reflections, they feared seeing themselves clearly. But Aphrodite's mirror was gentle. It showed people not what they looked like, but who they were becoming. A girl seeing herself before a celebration, a wife seeing herself after tears, a man seeing himself before proposing something brave. A mirror did not judge, it revealed. And Aphrodite valued revelation. She knew love cannot exist without truth, truth of self, truth of desire, truth of flaw, truth of beauty. Her mirror did not say be perfect, it said be honest. The scallop shell carried another layer of her essence, protection wrapped in vulnerability. It was the shell that lifted her from the sea foam in her most ancient myth. Smooth, curved, delicate, but strong enough to carry a goddess. The scallop symbolized the first moment she touched the world, the first breath she drew, the first step she took into existence. It reminded mortals that vulnerability can be sacred, that beginnings do not need grandeur to be powerful, and that even fragile things can protect what is precious. Sailors carved scallop shapes into their boats. Mothers hung scallop shells near cradles. Lovers offered scallop-shaped trinkets as promises of tenderness, because the shell told them, you are allowed to be soft, and you are allowed to be carried. The apple, the golden fruit that once rolled into a wedding and split Olympus open, held a heavier meaning. Choice, destiny. The apple was not a symbol of beauty, it was a symbol of the moment a heart chooses a path that cannot be undone. Paris' hand on that apple changed the world. It began a war. It tore a city apart. It shaped empires across centuries. A choice wrapped in longing. A longing wrapped in destiny. Aphrodite did not claim the apple because it proved she was the fairest. She claimed it because it represented the truth she understood better than any other god. That the choices born from the heart are the ones that alter history. Mortals kept apples on her altars not as offerings of beauty, but as reminders that love demands decisions, and decisions demand courage. And then there was the swan, graceful, serene, moving across water as though it were gliding on breath alone. Swans were symbols of lifelong bond pairs that stayed together for as long as they lived, mourning deeply when one was lost. Aphrodite cherished the swan because it mirrored the type of love she rarely found but endlessly protected. Not passion, not desire, but companionship, trust, a love that stands quietly beside someone through every season. Swans appeared in stories of her, in artworks, in carvings kept by couples who sought a bond beyond the first flutter of feeling, a love that grows rather than burns. A love that lasts rather than dazzles. A love that does not need constant proof, just presence. These symbols, the dove, the myrtle, the rose, the mirror, the scallop shell, the apple, the swan, were not decorations in her temples. They were reflections of human emotion. They helped mortals understand her. They helped mortals understand themselves. For Aphrodite did not ask for worship in grand gestures. She asked for awareness, awareness of longing, awareness of tenderness, awareness of the choices that shape relationships, awareness of the vulnerability that makes connection real. And so these symbols were woven into everyday life. A dove on a necklace to remind someone to stay loyal, a sprig of myrtle tucked into a bride's veil, a rose given not for perfection, but for honesty, a mirror passed from mother to daughter with whispered wisdom, a scallop shell placed on a bedside table for protection, an apple given as a confession of desire, a swan figurine kept by partners who wished for endurance. Every symbol carried her presence softly. Every symbol allowed her to live not in the sky, but in the small rituals of mortal life. Aphrodite was never a distant goddess. She lived in details, in gestures, in objects touched by human hands, and through these symbols, she remained close to hearts in turmoil, close to lovers in doubt, close to souls learning to trust, close to those who feared they were unworthy of love. For Aphrodite's symbols did not teach perfection. They taught acceptance, they taught courage, they taught tenderness, they taught truth. And as mortals carried these symbols, generation after generation, her wisdom flowed gently into the world. Because love is not a thunderbolt. It is a dove resting beside your window. It is a wreath of myrtle waiting to be woven. It is a rose with both petals and thorns. It is a mirror reflecting who you are beneath fear. It is a shell that protects the softness inside you. It is an apple asking you to choose your destiny. It is a swan gliding beside its partner for a lifetime. And in each of these simple things, Aphrodite lived quietly eternal, present, and always near. Even for a goddess who shaped the world through longing, Aphrodite did not walk through eternity alone. Her children, born from her joys and her sorrows, carried pieces of her heart that the world often misunderstood. They were not gods of storms or lightning or war. They were gods of feeling, gods of the inner landscape, gods of the emotions that mortals tried to hide, the emotions the Olympians pretended not to have, the emotions that carved history quietly from the inside out. Each of her children represented a different part of her, a truth she learned, a wound she carried, a lesson she understood too deeply to keep inside herself. They were the mirror of her immortal heart, and they shaped the world with a gentleness and brutality that only emotion can hold. Let us begin with Eros, her most famous child, her most misunderstood. Eros was desire personified, not crude, not shallow, but ancient and divine. In the earliest myths, he was older than the gods, older than order, older than creation itself. But later stories placed him in Aphrodite's arms, a child shaped from her longing and her complexities. Eros carried 2 arrows, one tipped with gold, one tipped with lead. The golden arrows sparked love so consuming that even gods trembled beneath its weight. The lead arrows extinguished affection instantly, turning admiration into rejection, tenderness into coldness. Through these dual arrows, Eros embodied the truth Aphrodite lived every day. Love can lift, love can wound, love can create, love can destroy. Eros was mischievous, yes, but not cruel. He understood that love must remain unpredictable to remain real. Mortals feared him because he was invisible. Gods feared him because he was unstoppable. But Aphrodite loved him because he represented the spark inside the heart, the spark no logic can silence. Eros taught the world that love arrives without permission, and sometimes it leaves without warning. He was the uncontrollable force inside her own domain, a reminder that even the goddess of love did not command love itself. Next came Harmonia, the daughter born from Aphrodite and Ares. From love and war, from softness and fury, from desire and chaos. Her birth alone was a paradox. How could harmony be born from conflict? How could peace be born from passion? How could balance be born from a union so disorderly the world whispered about it in secret? But Harmonia was proof that love and war are not opposites. They are siblings. They mold each other. They shape each other. They coexist in a way mortals rarely understand. She carried both her parents within her. From Aphrodite, she inherited gentleness, empathy, the ability to soothe storms in the human soul. From Ares, she inherited strength, courage, the ability to stand unshaken in chaos. Harmonia walked through the world like a calming breeze in a battlefield. She taught mortals that peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is the balance born from it. Her presence softened Ares. Her presence steadied Aphrodite. She married Cadmus, king of Thebes, bringing harmony not just as a virtue, but as a destiny. Their wedding gift was a necklace beautiful, divine, cursed. A symbol of how harmony must always wrestle with the shadows of those who love her. Harmonia lived not as a goddess of stillness, but as a goddess of equilibrium, a reminder that love requires strength, and strength requires love. But not all of Aphrodite's children were gentle. Some embodied the emotions mortals feared most. Phobos and Deimos, twins, born also from Ares. Fear and terror. The trembling before a confession. The dread before a battle. The shiver before telling someone the truth. They were often depicted as shadows beside their father on the battlefield. But their domain extended far beyond war. Phobos lived in the deepest corners of the heart. He whispered to mortals when they doubted themselves. He curled in their chests when they feared rejection, when they feared loss, when they feared being unworthy of love. Deimos moved differently. Where Phobos whispered, Deimos struck. He was the cold shock of realization, the terror of consequences, the overwhelming rush of panic that made the world tilt. Many believed these twins contradicted Aphrodite, but they were extensions of her. Love requires courage. Courage only exists in the presence of fear. Terror reveals what we are desperate to avoid losing. Phobos and Deimos represented the emotional shadows of desire. Without them, longing would be shallow, because to love deeply is to risk deeply. To open your heart is to invite fear inside. The twins were not cruel. They were necessary. They reminded mortals and gods alike that emotion is not always gentle. Sometimes it is overwhelming. Sometimes it is frightening. Sometimes it breaks before it heals. But not all of Aphrodite's children carried heaviness. Some carried return, completion, reciprocity. And Anteros was the god of returned love. Born from the need to understand the opposite side of longing, Anteros represented what happens when affection flows both ways. When someone loves you back, when hands meet in the middle, when longing does not become loneliness. He was the answer to Eros. Where Eros ignited desire, Anteros balanced it. Where Eros sparked yearning, Anteros soothed it. Where Eros made hearts race, Anteros made them rest. Many mortals prayed to Eros for love, but more prayed to Anteros to keep love once it arrived, because unreturned love is hunger, but returned love is nourishment. Anteros embodied the relief of certainty, the safety of reciprocity, the warmth of knowing you are not alone in what you feel. He reminded the world that love is not meant to be a one-sided ache. Love is meant to be a shared breath, a shared rhythm, a shared path. Then came Hermaphroditus, perhaps the most profound of Aphrodite's children, the child who embodied unity in its most intimate, transformative form. Born from Aphrodite and Hermes, Hermaphroditus carried beauty from his mother and charm from his father. But his myth was not defined by birth, it was defined by transformation. Psalmacis, a nymph, loved him with a devotion too intense to be contained. She begged the gods to unite them forever. And the gods answered not through marriage, not through companionship, but through fusion. Their bodies became one, their forms merged, Hermaphroditus became an embodiment of duality and wholeness, male and female, strength and softness, desire and identity, two truths living in the same sacred space. Mortals feared this story, misunderstood it, twisted it into warnings, but Aphrodite understood it perfectly. Hermaphroditus represented the truth beneath all love. That connection transforms us. That we become different after we love someone. That we merge in ways the world cannot always see. That unity is not the loss of self, but the expansion of it. Hermaphroditus was not a symbol of confusion. He was a symbol of completeness. A reminder that the heart does not recognize boundaries, only resonance. Together, these children formed a constellation of emotion. Eros held the spark of longing. Harmonia held the calm after storms. Phobos and Deimos held the shadows of the heart. Anteros held the relief of being loved. Hermaphroditus held the unity of souls. They were not gods of grand spectacle. They were gods of the inner world, the silent world, the world mortals entered when no one was watching, the world where Aphrodite herself lived most truthfully. Through her children, the emotional map of humanity unfolded. Eros showed why love begins. Anteros showed how love is sustained. Harmonia showed how love heals. Phobos and Deimos showed why love scares. Hermaphroditus showed how love transforms. Each god carried forward a piece of Aphrodite's story. Not her beauty but her depth. Not her allure but her truth. Not her mythology but her emotional reality. Because Aphrodite understood something no other Olympian did. Emotion is the quiet architect of the world. Desire moves nations. Fear protects them. Harmony rebuilds them. Reciprocity binds them. Unity strengthens them. And transformation preserves them. Mortals prayed to these children in their most private moments. A soldier whispered to Phobos before battle. A bride offered roses to Harmonia before her wedding. A lonely poet knelt to Eros in candlelight. A grieving lover prayed to Anteros for closure. Parents asked Hermaphroditus to bless children struggling to find their place in the world. Fearful hearts called Deimos by name without realizing it. Hopeful hearts invited Eros without meaning to. And Aphrodite watched, knowing that through her children, mortals learned to understand themselves, their strengths, their weakness, their longing, their shadows, their courage, their transformations, and the ways love changes them in ways they can never fully undo. Her children were not merely gods, they were emotions incarnate, woven into breath, woven into bone, woven into destiny. Aphrodite shaped them, and they shaped the world, quietly, deeply, forever. In every myth touched by Aphrodite, there was one constant thread: love changes things. Not loudly, not suddenly, but deeply, quietly, irrevocably, like water carving stone, like moonlight softening darkness, like a breath changing the course of a heartbeat. These transformations were never accidents. They were emotional evolutions, moments when love in all its forms reshaped the world, reshaped destiny, reshaped the self. And when we look closely at the myths that orbit her, we find a pattern of metamorphosis that feels almost meditative. A reminder that love is not static. Love is motion. Love is becoming. Some transformations were miraculous. Some were painful. Some were gentle. Some were tragic. But all of them were real. And all of them carried the fingerprints of a goddess who understood that emotion is the most powerful force in existence. Let us begin with the story of Myrrha, the woman who became a tree, the tree that birthed Adonis, the mortal who became Aphrodite's deepest wound. Myrrha's transformation was not born from desire alone. It was born from torment, from confusion, from a heart pulled in directions it could not understand. Her story was heavy with taboo, with shadows, with sorrow, But beneath the darkness lived a truth. Love, when twisted, transforms through pain. When her father discovered her forbidden longing, Mira fled into the forest, her breath shaking, her heart bruised, her identity shattered. There she collapsed beneath the moonlight, begging the gods to take her away from herself, to free her from the weight of her own emotions. And the gods, in their complicated mercy, answered. Her fingers grew into branches, her hair unraveled into leaves, her feet sank into the ground, her body became bark, her tears hardened into sap, and Mira became a myrrh tree, the resin of sorrow preserved in wood. But even in transformation, life persisted. Months later, the bark split open gently, and from the wounded trunk, a child emerged. Adonis, a boy of extraordinary beauty, fragile and luminous, born from grief, yet destined for love. Aphrodite found him, and something inside her shifted. For the first time, she held in her arms a child not of her blood but of fate, a child born through pain, yet capable of inspiring tenderness. This transformation, tree to child, sorrow to new beginning, taught her that love emerges from unexpected places and that beauty is sometimes born from the deepest wounds. Another transformation came from ivory, cold, still, lifeless, yet shaped with such devotion it whispered of longing. Pygmalion carved Galatea with hands trembling not from skill but from affection. He did not sculpt perfection. He sculpted possibility, the possibility that love could exist in a world that often disappointed him. Each curve he carved was a prayer, each smooth surface a confession, each detail a reflection of hope. And when he finished, the statue before him seemed almost alive, almost warm, almost breathing, almost real enough to love him back. He laid his hands on the ivory, soft enough not to offend, long enough to reveal yearning. But she remained cold, unmoving, silent. So during Aphrodite's festival, Pygmalion whispered to the goddess, not asking for passion, not asking for miracles, but asking for companionship. And Aphrodite, moved by the purity of his longing, touched the statue with invisible warmth. The ivory softened beneath her blessing. Color bloomed across the cheeks. Breath filled the lungs. The eyes opened. Galatea stepped from stillness into life, a transformation born not from tragedy, but from gentle devotion, a transformation that taught Aphrodite that love can be creation, not destruction, that tenderness can breathe life into what the world calls impossible. Then there was Hermaphroditus, the child who embodied unity, harmony of form, harmony of identity, harmony beyond definition. Born of Aphrodite and Hermes, Hermaphroditus carried beauty and charm in equal measure. But it was his transformation with the nymph Salmacis that became a symbol whispered through history. Salmacis loved him with a devotion so fierce she prayed to be joined with him forever. The gods answered with transformation. Their two bodies became one, two forms uniting into a single being, two identities merging into wholeness. Hermaphroditus was no longer just man or woman, he was both, he was neither. He was unity, and Aphrodite saw in him a truth she always understood instinctively. Love dissolves boundaries. Love blurs edges. Love expands identity. Love transforms us into versions of ourselves we could not foresee. Hermaphroditus became living poetry, a testament to the fluidity of emotion, the harmony between opposites, the beauty of integration. Through him, Aphrodite taught mortals that love is not about losing oneself. It is about becoming more. And then, there was Aeneas, the child of Aphrodite and Anchises, the mortal destined to carry the flame of a destroyed city into the heart of a rising empire. Aeneas' transformation was not physical, it was destiny itself changing shape. Born into peace, he became a refugee. Raised in comfort, he became a warrior. Shaped by Troy, he became the seed of Rome. When Troy fell, Aphrodite guided him through the smoke, not with thunder, not with divine force, but with quiet protection. He carried his father on his shoulders, his son by his side, and his city in his memory. His transformation was the transformation of purpose. Aphrodite watched as grief hardened into resilience, as loss turned into pilgrimage, as destiny transformed into empire. Aeneas would not have survived without her love, and Rome would not have existed without his endurance. Through him, Aphrodite learned that love can shape nations, that tenderness can influence history, that one life guided by emotion can alter the future of the world. Finally, there was Paris, a shepherd who became the spark that ignited 1,000 ships. He was not born remarkable. He was not raised to be legendary. He lived simply, quietly, unaware of the storm waiting to unfold around him. But destiny found him in the form of a golden apple, a choice, a whisper from a goddess of love. When Aphrodite promised him Helen, she did not transform him into a hero. She transformed him into a catalyst, a shepherd into a prince into a lover into a symbol into a turning point in history. Paris became proof that love does not only transform hearts, it transforms fate, it transforms kingdoms, it transforms the world. Mortals remembered him as the man who caused the Trojan War, but Aphrodite remembered him as the mortal who revealed the potency of choice, the way a single decision born from longing could ripple through centuries. Paris showed her how fragile the boundary is between desire and destiny, between affection and consequence, between one heart's longing and the world's unraveling. These transformations mirror to tree, Galatea to life, Hermaphroditus to unity, Aeneas to destiny, Paris to catalyst were more than myths. They were meditations, reflections on how love bends reality, how emotion shapes identity, how longing alters the path one walks, how tenderness births strength, how heartbreak births wisdom, how choices carve history. Aphrodite watched each transformation with eyes that understood more deeply than the other gods, because she, too, had been transformed by mortals, by grief, by devotion, by her own children, by the silent prayers whispered into her temples, by the tender bravery of hearts that dared to feel. Love changed everything around her, because love changed her. And in the quiet moments at the edges of myth, Aphrodite stood still and reflected. Love is motion, love is metamorphosis, love is the gentle force that reshapes even the immortal. And so, she whispered through the ages, let yourself be changed. Love makes and unmakes us all. Transformation is not loss. Transformation is awakening. Aphrodite did not remain only in myth. She traveled through history, reshaping herself with every civilization she touched. Her story moved like a tide rising, receding, returning anew with each era's imagination. No goddess adapted more gracefully to the passage of time, and no goddess revealed more clearly how humanity changes, yet stays the same. In ancient Greece, she began as a mysterious force of sea foam and sky, a presence born from beauty and inevitability, not command or conquest. The Greeks carved her into marble with calm faces, soft curves, and distant gazes, as though even the most skilled sculptors could not capture everything she held. They honored her in sanctuaries in Cyprus and Corinth, where devotion and desire were seen as human truths, not flaws. To them, Aphrodite was not simply a goddess, she was a necessity, a reminder that longing shaped empires as much as strategy did. But when her story crossed the sea to Rome, she transformed. The Romans reimagined her as Venus, mother of Aeneas, ancestor of Julius Caesar, grandmother of the Roman people themselves. She became not only the goddess of love, but the architect of empire, a figure used to legitimize power, to inspire loyalty, to anchor Rome's identity in divine beauty and destiny. The gentle Aphrodite of Greece became the regal Venus of Rome, a goddess not just of affection, but of politics, lineage, and national myth. Rome did not simply worship her, Rome built itself upon her. Centuries passed, empires fell, the world shifted, and Aphrodite's name grew quiet. But silence does not mean disappearance. The Renaissance called her back. Artists, poets, and philosophers rediscovered the myths, and among them, Aphrodite shimmered like a forgotten star. Sandro Botticelli lifted her from the sea once more in The Birth of Venus, painting her not as a goddess of temples, but as the embodiment of ideal beauty, nude, serene, innocent yet impossibly powerful. The scallop shell, the wind-blown hair, the pale skin, all became symbols of rebirth, purity, and the poetry of desire. She was no longer just myth, she was art, a visual language humanity could not stop speaking. Through Botticelli, Venus became the face of Western beauty. Graceful, soft, eternal. Her image echoed through frescoes, statues, and poems, weaving herself into the fabric of European imagination. As centuries continued, Aphrodite slipped into the modern world, almost unnoticed but unmistakably present. She appeared in psychology as the archetype of the lover, the part of the human psyche that seeks harmony, sensuality, connection, and meaning. She appeared in fashion, where beauty became expression, and self-adornment became ritual. She appeared in cinema, where romance stories echoed her influence, shaping how modern audiences understood attraction and longing. Even advertising borrowed her symbols, roses, mirrors, softness, allure, transforming them into a visual language meant to awaken desire, the same way ancient offerings once did. She lived in Art Nouveau curves, in Hollywood's golden age silhouettes, in every love song written in a quiet room, in every photograph capturing the human form as something sacred. Aphrodite became the modern world's quiet muse, not a goddess on an altar, but a presence in our collective unconscious. In psychology, she became more than myth, she became metaphor, a reminder that humans crave connection not out of weakness, but out of instinct. That desire is not sin, but survival. That beauty is not superficial, but spiritual, a universal language of attention, compassion, and wonder. Even now, in a world of screens and speed, Aphrodite remains. She appears when someone puts on perfume before a date. She appears in the way two hands find each other in a crowded room. She appears in the way people turn toward beauty after heartbreak, seeking healing through creation, softness, and hope. She appears in fashion campaigns, in whispered poems shared online, in romantic films that end in tears, in the quiet bravery it takes to say, "I love you" first. Modern culture has created new temples, magazines, art studios, movie screens, cosmetics counters, all devoted, consciously or unconsciously, to the same idea she has carried for thousands of years, that beauty and desire shape the human experience. For some, beauty is religion, not worshipped with candles, but with aspiration, not practiced with incense, but with reflection in a mirror, not expressed with hymns, but with effort to feel seen, to feel admired, to feel understood. Aphrodite lives inside that effort. She has survived because she represents something the world will never outgrow: the longing to love and to be loved, the hunger for beauty that reflects our inner world, the desire to feel connected, the need to feel alive. From Greece's seafoam goddess, to Rome's mother of empire, to Renaissance muse, to modern archetype, Aphrodite remains a timeless reminder that emotion, beauty, and longing are not indulgences, they are essential human truths. And in every era, in every culture, in every heart that beats a little faster when touched by something beautiful, she endures, a goddess of the past, a symbol of the present, a quiet force shaping the future. Aphrodite eternal because emotion is eternal, timeless because beauty is timeless, alive because love is alive. And humanity, in every generation, continues to worship those truths even when they no longer remember her name. Aphrodite was surrounded by worship, but worship is not companionship. She was surrounded by beauty, but beauty is not comfort. She was surrounded by desire, but desire is not understanding. Mortals imagined her existence as effortless, wrapped in affection, wrapped in adoration, wrapped in the sweetness of love stories she herself inspired. But gods carry burdens mortals never see, and the one Aphrodite carried most quietly was loneliness. Ares loved her fiercely, recklessly, with a passion that could shake mountains. He loved her with the fire of battle, with the urgency of war, with the hunger of someone who feared losing even what he held. But Ares belonged to conflict, and Aphrodite belonged to connection. Their worlds touched, but never intertwined. He loved with fire, she loved with breath, and fire and breath do not build a home. War divided them again and again, not because they lacked passion, but because passion alone cannot create peace. Hephaestus loved her differently, softly, faithfully, with the devotion of a man who builds what he cannot have. He loved her with hands that shaped beauty, and a heart that felt unworthy of it. Hephaestus offered her stability, offered her sanctuary, offered her gentleness the world often forgot she needed. But Aphrodite did not choose him, not out of cruelty, not out of arrogance, simply because her heart did not move toward him the way his moved toward her, and so his love became another quiet weight she carried, the guilt of hurting someone kind, the sorrow of being unable to return softness with softness. And then there was Adonis, the boy who made her laugh quietly, walk slowly, feel tenderly. He loved her without fear, without strategy, without the shadow of Olympus standing behind his eyes. He loved her simply because loving her felt natural, the way flowers turn toward sunlight. And she loved him with a vulnerability so deep she barely recognized herself inside it. Adonis softened her edges. He gave her moments of being human, moments of stillness, moments of peace, moments where the goddess of love was simply a woman being held. And when he died in her arms, something inside her broke, the kind of break that does not heal straight, the kind of break that leaves a quiet ache forever. She pressed her face to his, felt the warmth fading, and whispered a goodbye that no immortal should ever have to say. The anemone flowers that bloomed from his blood were not mere symbols, they were her grief made visible. A reminder that even a goddess can suffer loss. Through these loves, Ares, Hephaestus, Adonis, Aphrodite learned the truth mortals know all too well. To love is to risk loneliness. To love deeply is to risk breaking. And immortality does not protect the heart, it only makes the grieving longer. Even her children reflected parts of her she rarely showed. Eros carried her longing, Harmonia carried her hope, Phobos and Deimos carried her fears, the shadows of every heart she touched. Hermaphroditus carried her understanding of unity, her wish that opposites might one day coexist without tearing each other apart. Anteros carried her yearning for love that is returned and not merely prayed for in vain. Her children were not just gods, they were pieces of her emotional landscape, fragments of her heart placed in bodies that could walk the world for her. But the world rarely saw the truth behind her symbols. Mortals saw roses, not thorns. They saw beauty, not burden. They saw desire, not the ache beneath it. They saw the goddess of love, not the woman who held grief with quiet dignity. Even when surrounded by adoration, Aphrodite often stood alone, not because she lacked love, but because she understood it too deeply. She felt every prayer whispered through tears. She felt every heartbreak offered at her altar. She felt every longing that mortals tried to silence. And in carrying all this, she made room for very little of her own. Her loneliness was not emptiness, it was empathy. It was knowing too much of the human heart, too much of its fragility, too much of its constant trembling. And so she lived in a delicate balance, guiding others toward love, while quietly mourning the parts of herself that love had broken. In the end, Aphrodite's story was not only about beauty, not only about desire, not only about devotion. It was about endurance, the endurance of loving again after loss, the endurance of feeling deeply in a world that often punishes depth, the endurance of holding longing without letting it consume you. For even the goddess of love knew loss, and it was in that loss that she became not just divine but relatable, human, understandable, a presence who saw the world not from a throne of perfection, but from the quiet ache inside every heart that has dared to love at all. Tonight, the world grows quiet around you. The long stories of gods and mortals drift farther and farther away, like footprints slowly disappearing beneath the tide. Olympus breathes softly now, its ancient halls dimmed beneath starlight, its marble pillars warmed by the glow of unseen lamps. You can almost hear the mountain inhaling, exhaling, settling into its own version of sleep. The sea below whispers to the shore, a rhythm older than myth, older than memory, older than the rise of any god. Its gentle waves spread across the sand like a lullaby, pulling every thought in your mind into something slower, softer, safer. Somewhere above that quiet sea, a single dove glides through the dark, its wings moving like a heartbeat you can almost sync with. You can imagine the softness of those feathers, the calm loyalty carried in every stroke of its wings, the way it circles gently before disappearing into the silver night. Far away but not too far, a rose begins to open. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just one petal at a time, as though it knows the night is watching. Its scent drifts across the breeze, warm and faint, like a memory you once loved but no longer hurts to hold. The thorns stay hidden in shadow. Tonight is for petals only. A candle flickers somewhere near you. Its flame leans in one direction, then the other. Never fighting, always dancing. The warm glow kisses the air with gold, softening every edge, making even silence feel illuminated. And if you listen closely, you can almost hear Aphrodite walking through that glow, not as a goddess carved from marble, not as an untouchable symbol, but as a quiet presence passing gently by your thoughts. She leaves no footsteps, only warmth. The world has always imagined her as perfection, flawless beauty, irresistible allure, a face sculpted by destiny. But perfection does not comfort tired hearts. Perfection does not understand longing. Perfection does not sit at the edge of the bed when someone is too overwhelmed to speak. No, Aphrodite was never perfection. She was vulnerability shaped into a goddess. She was tenderness, learning how to stand. She was every cracked truth hidden behind beauty, every trembling confession, every ache of wanting that someone once tried to bury. She was the moment before a kiss, the breath between words, the soft courage it takes to care. And so tonight, as the world grows quieter, you are invited into that softness. Not the softness of weakness, but the softness of being allowed to feel. The sea moves in and out, your breathing follows. The rose opens a little more, your thoughts open with it. The dove circles once, then drifts into stillness. Your heartbeat slows. Somewhere above, Olympus hums, not loudly, not powerfully, just a low, steady exhale carried by the ancient wind. Aphrodite hears it too, the quiet thrum of a world that still believes in beauty, not because it is perfect, but because it is fleeting, because it is fragile, because it is honest. She has watched empires rise from longing, and fall from longing, and rebuild from longing again. She has touched the lives of shepherds and kings, artists and warriors, women who grieved, men who dared to hope, children who gazed at the sea wondering what their futures would become. She has seen the world transform again and again through love that was messy, imperfect, unpredictable, and deeply human. And she knows better than anyone that your heart is not meant to be polished into flawlessness. Your heart is meant to breathe, to ache, to soften, to rest. Tonight is for that resting, for the heaviness leaving your shoulders, for the thoughts quietly unclenching, for the part of you that has carried too much, for too long, finally being allowed to set everything down. The waves move, the candle glows, the dove settles onto a branch, the rose opens fully. Olympus sighs again, and Aphrodite kneels beside that quiet. She does not speak, she does not explain. She simply exists there, a reminder that love has always been a place you return to, not a problem you solve. She touches the air near your cheek, not to wake you, but to soothe you into stillness, like a mother brushing back the hair of a sleeping child, like a lover tracing the outline of someone they miss, like a friend who understands without needing any words at all. The night deepens, your breath softens, your thoughts loosen from the tight knots they formed during the day. The world grows dimmer, simpler, gentler, and as your eyes grow heavier, as sleep begins to gather around you, Aphrodite whispers the only truth that matters. Tonight, may you rest with the quiet certainty that love, complicated, imperfect, human, was always meant to be felt, not solved. Now drift, breathe. Let the waves carry you. Let the candle dim. Let Olympus fall silent. Let the goddess fade softly into the dark. And let sleep take your hand the way love always hoped to, patiently, quietly, completely.